the revisitor of the sacred message. Your soul is bound for the sky, your corpse is beneath the ground. You shall go up to the sky. You shall ascend to those who are above the earth. For your wings are those of a falcon, your gleam is that of a star. Ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. A chakra is a node, a vortex of energy at the conjunction point of the spirit and the body, a transition of the spiritual life force from the higher dimensions into the four-dimensional world. Ancient Tibetan manuscript of unknown date and origin. We are back again, and I feel no closer to our destination. Nitrogen said to the others, once again gathered outside the cave and engaged in several simultaneous discussions. Maybe, that's the nature of the quest for enlightenment, Hydrogen suggested. We are destined for complex discoveries, until we reach our destination, Silicon added. The journey to the sign will not be straightforward. We must understand every bit of knowledge we find. Lead took the opportunity to question Silicon. Before we came back, you said that some of the military religious orders, such as the Portuguese Order of Christ, became the earliest multinational corporations, but before the Crusades, Europe were technologically inferior to Asia. How did they do it? During the 2 centuries they fought, the warring nations learned much from each other. Once Europeans understood and adopted gunpowder, combining its powers with their superior naval skills, they stopped the Ottomans' western advance. The Asian conquerors were not naval powers. Guns, big ships, scientific and navigational advances, maps and compasses, and the desire to conquer the world bore Europe's colonial era, just as Saladin and Richard foresaw and Pizarro described. What happened to the military orders' vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience? At least they stuck to obedience, Silicon said, a secret oath of obedience to their goal to control the world's riches. Why, Gold asked, did some orders adopt the 5 or skull symbols? I can't say, Silicon answered, but whatever they represent, the ancient world understood. They used them often in religious and spiritual art, but the meaning has been forgotten or lost. But why did the Church go after the Templars and not the others, like the Hospitallers? Hydrogen asked. Perhaps on Earth, some suggested. Maybe, Calcium said, what they discovered threatened Rome's religious and political monopoly. Oxygen had another topic in mind. Why was ancient Europe so isolated? Before the polar shift, most of northwestern Europe was under miles of ice, and the rest of Europe was cold, dry, and inhospitable. Northern Europe became habitable only after the pole shift melted the ice. When the North Asian migrants met other Asians in the south, they merged culturally and racially. But, those that reached northern Europe found an uninhabited land of ice, meltwater swamps, or dense forests. They preserved some of their languages, myths, and they threatened the church? Or secret ancient knowledge? Silicon traditions, but their descendants were isolated for millennia until new immigrants from Asia and the Romans brought them back in contact with the rest of the world about 2,000 years ago. The only European Ice Age civilizations were far to the south, in the Mediterranean peninsulas and islands like Malta, Iberia, and Sicily. The islands were larger and connected to each other and the continent, since the seas were lower. They left megalithic temple ruins and cave paintings. If northern Asia was as temperate as modern Europe before the pole shift, then southern Europe must have been like the fringes of modern Siberia. Europe could not have supported a large population, but northern Asia could have. No wonder so many ancient civilizations and monuments are in Asia. During all those catastrophes, did the gods help people? If so, which one? The one symbolized by the serpent or the bird of prey? The plus or 5 gods? Hydrogen's question brought on a silence just as a shower of comets streaked the clear night sky. They all thought of the same thing. For even hydrogen and oxygen, the event had new meaning. The shooting stars reminded them of what people saw that fateful day 17,000 years ago. When following glowing lights and violent storms, the sky tumbled and heaven streaked across the sky. They realized how that event affected history. I wonder what happened to my beloved library. Silicon whispered. Later they gathered near the awaiting the rising sun and departure unknown realm. Once again they cast themselves into the sparks, hues, and halos of strange light. Moments later, they found themselves in a forested meadow of lush vegetation and centuries-old transportal, for another trees. Jagged snow-capped mountains stretched towards the purple horizon. A stream of pure water gurgled past them. Countless birds sang enthusiastically, as bees and butterflies waltzed to their enchanting tunes. If I were the creator, Helium said, I would certainly hang around here. The perfect harmony of light, color, and movement mesmerized them. Everything is so perfectly in order, nothing out of place, Silicon said. Nitrogen spotted something. Except that man over there. A couple of 100 meters away, an old willow tree bowed gracefully, spreading its arms to shelter a lone man's slim body. He sat motionless, cross-legged, eyes closed. A contented smile contradicted his ragged condition. He wore old stitched clothes and no shoes. Meticulously clean, his long hair and beard and thin figure attested to arduous asceticism. What is he up to? Lead whispered. I think he's meditating, Silicon said. What's that? Iron wondered. A state of quiet contemplation aimed at hidden truths unseen by the senses. Call it a sort of extrasensory perceptive awakening. The voice answered from a white crystal rock, lying on a sun-bleached, wrinkled khaki cloth, along with a piece of dried flat bread and a water-filled clay bowl. I am sodium, and this is my friend chlorine. Two of the most abundant earthlings, Silicon intoned, individually poisonous, but together as salt, essential to all life. We're glad to meet you. Likewise. Who is this man? His visitors call him Siddhartha. We have wandered around these mountains since his friend brought us here. He spends his time thinking and meditating. He rarely eats and then only the fruits and vegetables visitors give him. Now I remember, Silicon said. He will be known as Buddha, the one who attained Buddhahood. He will inspire the faith of billions, his wisdom and influence transcending culture and time. A person of privilege, he rejected comfort to seek enlightenment in solitude and austerity. How so? Hydrogen asked excitedly. His father Suddhodana ruled the Shakya tribe in the southern Himalayas, Sodium replied. According to legend, at his birth a seer predicted he would be either a king or a teacher. His father tried to raise him to be king. He had everything. At 16 he married Yasodhara and lived with her and his other concubines for 13 years. But then, he encountered life's harsh realities. R explained. Siddhartha. One day he met a decrepit old man. Then he saw a sick person. Finally he saw a corpse in a funeral procession. He'd never seen such things. When he met an ascetic, the man's inner strength, tranquility, and detachment from comforts awakened Siddhartha. He renounced life's comfort and followed the ascetic's path for 6 years. He studied with scholars in many places. Then came the period some call the dawn of truth. In time, Siddhartha gained an understanding of his past lives and the perception of human souls disappearing and reappearing in the worldly realm, people trapped in an endless cycle of death and rebirth, depending on their deeds. He called it the cycle of karma and reincarnation. What are they? Our friends asked. Karma is related to the way people live in harmony with others, the world, and nature. A soul's friends wanted to know more. Sodium, what I will tell you I learned from karma influences its rebirth or reincarnation. So, Silver noted, human spirits are reborn into earthly life, and do not ascend to the heavenly abodes of the gods. The true nature, origin, and destiny of the human soul/spirit/ka are mysteries. Let me tell you something else Siddhartha observed that is closely related to our quest. He had visions of the dissolution and evolution of many world cycles, something many ancient myths deal with. Siddhartha sat motionless, though he seemed to smile more visibly. Buddha used his new understandings to find ways to stop the corruption of the soul. Legend has it that after 35 years he reached enlightenment or awakening Buddhahood. Then people called him Buddha. Anyone who aspires to Buddhahood undergoes, as Siddhartha did, the Bodhisattva, a time of intense exercise to develop generosity, discipline, renunciation, wisdom, benevolence, and perfect equanimity. Buddha taught the purest love and profoundest wisdom. He emphasized the search for the highest truth. You mentioned that when we first met, Hydrogen said. What is the highest truth? I cannot say with any certainty, Silicon admitted, but they say Buddha understood the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Here is how he described it: ignorance results in moral and immoral consciousness conditioning activities. Consciousness results in mind and matter. Mind and matter result in the senses. Senses result in contact. Contact results in feeling. Feeling results in desire and craving. Desire and craving result in grasping. Grasping results in becoming. Becoming results in birth. Birth results in decay, death, sorrow, pain, despair, and ignorance. In other words, ignorance fuels humanity's endless cycle of birth and rebirth. That explains all the human suffering, pollution, chaos, and overpopulation we know all too well. Buddha was onto something all right. Helium burbled. Buddha Silicon droned on, understood the Four Noble Truths, which explain that first, the human condition is steeped in suffering, and its life estranged from reality. Second, humanity's delusion, anxiety, and suffering arise from their indulgence of insatiable and illusory desires that separate them from each other, life, and reality and the source. Third, suffering will end only when humans suppress, overcome, and master false desires and reach a state of detachment, indifference to the world's luxuries. Fourth, salvation comes from following the eightfold path of right knowledge, right aspirations, right speech, truthfulness, right behavior, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and finally right contemplation. Those truths are revealed to those who follow the path, thereby reaching toward nirvana. Scholars have noted that the earliest, purest Buddhism was not a system of psychological and ethical guidance for life. Buddha certainly tells his disciples that they should believe nothing before it's been thoroughly pondered, digested, and tested, not even his own teachings. He always stresses the importance of intellect and reason. Chlorine spoke from experience. Buddha's insistence on individual thinking and religion, but a discipline and initiative influenced Buddhism. Monasteries were widespread, decentralized, and relatively independent. Scholars formed many independent schools. Except for regional Buddhist societies, there is no supranational, centralized, authoritative establishment, unlike the case with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Those religions discourage Buddhism's evolutionary approach to spirituality. Observing its colleagues' utopian expressions, Silicon Buddhist wielded much influence, and meddled in the political systems of many nations and communities. One cannot deny that elitism and corruption did not exist amongst such institutions. Just then Hydrogen noticed an expression of irritation on Buddha's face. He no longer smiled. Through many a birth in existence wandered I, seeking, but not finding, the builder of this house, an unfamiliar voice announced. Our friends looked around to see who was saying words that described their mission, their reason for being there. But they saw no one except Buddha, his eyes open and looking at them. Our friends looked behind them to see what attracted Siddhartha. Seeing nothing, they turned back to Buddha, still staring with the same probing intensity. Yes, my tiny guests, it is you. Hydrogen spoke first. Forgive us for disturbing your peace, Your Highness. We did not realize you could hear us. Frankly, this has never happened. No human ever noticed us before. Buddha smiled. First, do not call me Highness. Like you, I am a humble seeker of the highest truth. I have heard all you said since you came. Deviation from encourages a established doctrine, but diverse, dynamic, and Was quick to add, wealthy and powerful institutions did historically evolve. But how can you communicate with us? Carbon stammered. There are many ways of understanding and communicating with the universe. Perhaps language is compromising and inefficient. We all hold the universal essence of truth within us. We must tap into the stream of consciousness, much like we feel the wind, river currents, or the energy in nature. Often physically handicapped people are forced to enhance their extrasensory ability. In the last few years I have learned nature's hidden rhythms and language. Once I was able to feel and help a wounded animal. I was amazed when the other species behaved as if they knew it. That is how I communicate with you. Sensing our friend's intimidation, Siddhartha continued. I heard about your experiences intrigue me. Your journeys. Your strange, special earthlings, whom I am privileged to meet. Hydrogen went first. Sir, what is the highest truth? Buddha laughed. The honest answer is that I'm not quite sure. What your friend referred to earlier is a state of understanding I have yet to attain. Here and now, I believe the highest truth is the true nature of existence of all things, present and absent, visible or invisible, sensed or not. The true nature of all and the way all things relate to everything else. The beginning of what existed before and the end destiny of all things, and what lies beyond. The very purpose of the pulsating universal consciousness. The heartbeat of life as we see it. The origin and destiny of all. Our friends listened hypnotically. Only Hydrogen whispered, the source. You can call it that. Frankly, I like that. I think we all seek the same answers. Most entities in the universe do not thirst for them. They simply exist, floating along aimlessly. The few who seek enlightenment often fail. Only a few are sufficiently dedicated to perceive the highest truth. I certainly hope we are among them. Therefore the highest truth can also be understood as understanding one's connection with all creation or the source, as you call it. So seeking the highest truth leads to the creator source. Oxygen concluded. Gold addressed the great sage. Sir, we have all seen great human suffering in different times and places in the world. The disharmony between humanity and the rest of the earth is devastating the world, Nitrogen added. Gold took up the theme. Your four noble truths address the causes of human misery. Can you explain why humans are the only species/entity on the planet that suffers from disharmony? My friends, Buddha said, the simplest way to talk about such things is to describe basic principles. Everything, whether we perceive it or not, is composed of the true essence of reality, the source. How and in what context I cannot yet explain, since I lack scientific understanding of the complex universal fabric. All creation is in some way derived from the source. Most things relate to the connection intuitively. A stone tumbles, turns, and erodes in a water torrent. As summer becomes winter, the trees part with their leaves. Birds migrate all year to find hospitable climates. Flowers ceaselessly follow the sun. All animals and plants are inherently harmonious universe. Like electrical universal electricity grid, Silicon added. Humans alone seem to be disconnected. No other species has evolved to such an unnatural state of existence. Humans are born, live, get sick, grow weak, and connected with their appliances connected to and decay, nothing but experiences. They have compassion, love, and kindness, and yet they commit the most dreadful deeds against themselves and everything around them. Buddha paused, gathered his fluttering hair, and gazed at the invisible wind, as if welcoming a favored visitor. I do not understand the causes of human disharmony, but I think the causes are historic. Anyhow, universal harmony is revealed only to those who let go of self-centered delusions like greed, hate, self-admiration, egoism, and so on. Selfless living lets us rediscover our universal connection, an eternal true love. Recognizing our ignorance, cleansing our minds, and reconnecting the soul with the universe is something only a few attempt and fewer achieve. Nirvana is not easily reached. Leaving my family and the luxuries of my youth was hard. But I know no other way. Otherwise, I would not be truly alive, but a physically functioning yet spiritually dysfunctional organic mechanism. I have learned, Siddhartha, Silicone said, that you believe everything is transitory and impermanent. Most ancient traditions believed the immortal human soul is resurrected to reach some heavenly place. What about that? Many ancient traditions deal with the duality of human nature, a physical body, and a spirit/ka/chi. Others describe an ordeal between the opposing universal forces of good and evil, positive and negative, or matter and energy. Those universal contrasts exist, but I believe that good and evil are different manifestations of the same creation. The essence of the universe is the source of both, yet beyond the nature of both. Good and evil are both parts of the created and perceived universe on opposite ends of the same a collection, the universal of incoherent qualities of spectrum of consciousness. Similarly, both matter and energy are transitional illusory forms of a much higher state of consciousness, the Godhead, or the source of all creation. Nobody really knows. Perhaps, science will explain the exact nature of the universe one day. Do you discount humanity's hope of a life after death? Not at all. In fact, that is what we should all strive for. I believe there is no better place after life, no heavenly abode of the gods or God, no paradise. It is here. Both heaven and hell are here and now. Humans themselves are responsible for where their consciousness resides. Heaven or hell manifests from our present interactions with the world. Do you understand? They define our choice, not in some future but right here and now. We should strive to reach a higher level of consciousness. Spiritual life is a continuous journey that transcends mortal life. It does not start with birth or end with death. In one shape or another, we exist in eternity. My disagreement is not with the human's belief in immortal spiritual existence, or the soul if you wish, but humans' distorted understanding of it. I believe that we manifest in this miserable material existence to study and learn. Learn to comprehend the realities of the universe, to raise our consciousness level. Raise our consciousness level, so that we can manifest in a higher dimensional realm of existence. As long as we do not achieve that higher state of consciousness, we can only return into a material existence. Stuck right down here in our own entrapped tombs. That is the true nature of the four-dimensional human existence. Buddha seemed disturbed. It remains a mystery to me how a shadowy web of corruption, manipulation, and exploitation controls this world and its occupants, who misunderstand or misrepresent the sacred message of the highest truth. Maybe one day you time travelers will understand. Are you a revisitor of the sacred message? Hydrogen bluntly inquired. Buddha's eyes lit up. I hope so, my friend. I sincerely hope I am worthy. I teach my friends to remain detached from unnecessary comforts and possessions, from rigidity and dogma. I hope my message does not become another distorted religion. Sir, Calcium interrupted, you said something about human perception of a four-dimensional reality. What did you mean by that? Everything appears dimensions three-dimensional, move about in space, and experience linear forward-moving time. We are confined within that realm. We have developed mathematical ways to analyze our four-dimensional conscious prison. I believe dreams and imagination let us perceive the universe in other ways. To move unhindered in the space-time continuum we often call hallucination. I have tried to escape those limitations. I freed my consciousness from my body in a controlled dream state. I transcended the boundaries of space. Then I began to leap in time. I saw my own childhood and other past events. Then I began to see past worlds. History unfolded before me. Mystics call this soul traveling. Buddha paused, closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and sat still without exhaling. Then he exhaled, and continued. I want to tell you something that I do not quite understand, because I am not sure if I am hallucinating or having a real experience. Often people have nearly fatal accidents. They often recount similar experiences floating in space, watching their motionless bodies, reviewing their lives in a flash, passing through tunnels of light, rising above Earth, and in four universal space and time. We seeing and entering light spheres and astral planes, being greeted by their deceased relatives, instructing guardians, and so on. Buddha paused for a moment. I believe I have experienced the higher dimensions of this planet. Several times, while in a deep meditative state. I lost consciousness of who I was and where and when. At that point, I could see the world from above. Our world was like a beautiful giant ball of blue, white, brown, beige, and green. On a few occasions something unexplainable happened. For a few moments, I saw fields of light, glowing halos, circular fields of astral light encircling the planet. Buddha's description of the Earth's astral lights reminded our friends of the transportal. Another time, on a moonless night I saw little lights scattered in Earth's astral regions, like the lights of a city seen at night from a distance. I thought I felt pulses of consciousness saying something to me. What? Hydrogen asked. God is light. Siddhartha opened his eyes, looked at our friends, and smiled. He raised his head and looked at the clear night sky, whose stars appeared just like lights suspended in heaven. What did God is light mean exactly? I really believe that life exists in numerous dimensions. I think it is all related to heavenly bodies and realms, not abodes. Maybe the ancients meant the same thing. When we look at the sun, moon, or the stars with our four-dimensional senses, we see everything in only four dimensions. I think there is much more to the universe and the empty spaces of the night sky. Maybe we don't have the right set of eyes or the consciousness level to perceive it. Silicone whispered, like a receiver tuned to the wrong frequency. Sir, Sulfur said, do you think heaven is somewhere in our planet's astral fields or somewhere in the stars? We cannot be certain either way, Buddha replied, but one thing is sure, heaven could be here, there, or maybe everywhere. We think it beyond our living grasp, but it may not be. The same is true of hell. I think heaven and hell can be here and now, depending on our consciousness. We can choose to exist in heaven or hell, or as how we will reincarnate in our next life. We are responsible for determining our fate with conscious dedication and effort. That is why I define the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as a simple ethical model during the physical journey. That, I hope, is the way to heaven, whatever or wherever it is. At that moment, a pair of shining red eyes appeared from the darkness of the woods. It was as if a fearsome god was coming to punish them for the crime of learning. A few moments later, a young limping deer walked out of the darkness of their unfamiliarity, to approach the smiling Siddhartha. His hand held out a piece of dried flat bread. The deer appreciatively licked his fingers, took the bread, and limped back into the darkness. Buddha turned smilingly towards our friends. Love and compassion are universally understood truths, don't you agree? Please tell us about the ancient Hindu scriptures, Gold said. Buddha laughed. They are too much to read in a lifetime, but I think you time travelers are after clues about the distant past and the fate of your library, right? I want to learn about the cataclysms and cycles of destruction, too. The group reviewed their past experiences and knowledge of earthly cataclysms, the migrating survivors, the climatic transformations, unexplainable monuments and manuscripts, maps showing unseen lands, and other lost and forgotten legacies. After all that, Buddha said, I remember a phrase from an ancient text, the Mahabharata, that describes a great calamity. Dense arrows of flame, like a great shower, issued forth upon creation. A thick gloom swiftly settled upon them. All points of the compass were lost in darkness. Fierce winds began to blow. Clouds roared upward, showering dust and gravel. Birds croaked madly. The very elements seemed disturbed. The sun seemed to waver in the heavens. The earth shook, scorched by the terrible violent heat. Elephants burst into flames and ran to and fro in frenzy. Over a vast area other animals crumpled to the ground and died. From all points of the compass the arrows of flame rained continuously and fiercely. I had never understood that until I heard your story tonight. It sounds like a description of meteors with dust tails throwing arrows of flame. The wavering sun would have been the planet shifting on its axis. Sir, this might describe the events over 14,000 years before your time. This may be what forced the northern Aryans to move south, some reaching here. The Tamil and the Indus-Sarasvati legends describe similar cataclysmic events and floods. Tell me, what caused the floods? The North and South Poles were in other places once. Much of the world's water was stored in gigantic ice caps. Our ice caps are not a fraction of the old Ice Age version. After the cataclysm, the old ice caps thawed faster than the new ones could reabsorb them, so the sea levels rose over 150 meters, inundating much of the ancient coastal areas where people lived during the Ice Age. There are at least 600 known flood myths from all around the world. When did the floods occur? Buddha asked. About 25 scientists found geological between 16 and 14,000 years ago, 13 and 11,000 years ago, and 7 to 8,000 years ago. Buddha lowered his head, and raised his clasped hands to his heart, and sighed, "Poor souls! What catastrophe! The suffering!" Then he said, "The Vedas describe the legend of Manu, a great sage whom a great fish told to build a ship. The ship carried Manu and 7 rishis or sages and landed high in the Himalayas after the flood. They saved all the seeds, crops, and animals, as well as all the sacred knowledge and sciences and passed them on to the survivors here. Thousands of years later what remained as oral tradition was written down as the Vedas and several other texts. Manu is like another 600 legendary characters, including the Babylonian Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, the Zoroastrian Yuma, the Chinese Mahe/Manu, the Greek Deucalion, the Scandinavian Bergelmer, the Maasai Tumbano, the Hebrew Noah, and others. Silicone added. So my premonitions were right. I have sensed cycles of global destruction in the very distant past. So much of our wisdom descended from the Himalayan highland monasteries centuries after you lived, evidence of super floods. Sumerians Asudra, the Assyrians/Akkadian or other mountain ranges around the world. Ancient wisdom is often associated with mountaintop sanctuaries, calcium observed. Simple, helium said. Mountaintops stay above water. I have seen ancient texts in Himalayan monasteries, Buddha said, often written on palm leaves or stone tablets in forgotten languages. Monks sworn to secrecy guard them. Texts like the Tibetan Tai Tu or the Chinese Venking survived that way. Do people find sunken ruins in the future? Buddha asked. Sunken ruins have been found off the Egyptian, Indian, Caribbean, and Cuban coasts. Were they glorious? Some measure over 20 kilometers across, indicating developed and populated urban centers, Silicone said. Some contain multi-story structures of complex geometric shape. And that's only what the water hasn't eroded. So much lost and forgotten, Buddha murmured. Sir, Silver said, can you please tell us about the Hindu gods? There are many, with different traits, responsibilities, arsenals, and consorts. They are always shown larger than humans and with blue skin. Just like the Egyptian gods, Tin noted. There are lots of tales, too many to tell, but a couple of puzzling things may interest you. The Vedas describe a cosmic hierarchy, a graded series of ascending heavenly systems, planets as you called them earlier, inaccessible to those in the lower systems. The greatest authority in the material universe is Brahma, who lives in Brahmaloka, the highest planetary system. Beneath Brahmaloka are other planetary systems inhabited by ascetic rishis/sages who cultivate wisdom. Beneath those systems is the realm of the Deva, whose battles with lower dark forces sometimes affect life on Earth. The Deva live a long time in a relatively stable social and political state. They are in charge of maintaining the order of the physical cosmos, not well defined in the Vedas. The worst dark forces are the Asura, closely related to the Deva. The Purana are fantastic tales of wars between the Deva and the Asura. Another book, the Mahabharata, says the Asura invaded the earth after a cataclysm. The Vedic literature also describes non-human races in a hierarchy lower than the Deva. Some were demonic, and others were neutral. That sounds like a battle for a cosmic colonial order, Iron said. According to the Vedas, Buddha said, the lower entities exist in three categories of consciousness: sattva, pure goodness and being; rajas, passionate desires, or tamas, darkness and delusion. Humans are mostly in the mode of passion, with some goodness and ignorance. The world's battle sagas describe ancient battles for Earth. Carbon asked, were they the gods of ancient humanity? That might structures scattered suggested. Buddha recited some puzzling passages from the Puranas and Mahabharata. His sabha clung to the sky at a league's length. He threw rockets, explained the myths and stone all over the planet, calcium. Missiles, javelins, pausing. The sky seemed to hold 100 suns, 100 moons. And spears, spikes, 3-bladed. Flamethrowers, without 100 myriad stars. Neither day nor night could be made out, nor the points of compass. I quickly laid out an arrow, which killed by seeking out sound, to kill them. All the Danavas who had been screeching lay dead, killed by the blazing sun like arrows that were triggered by sound. But the Sabha itself escaped attack, and at last Krishna hurls against it his favorite fire weapon, a discus having the shape of the haloed Sunday. Severed in half by the impact, the entire aerial city fell down. Gurkha, flying in his swift and powerful Vimana, hurled against the three cities of the Vrishnas and Andahakas a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as the 1,000 suns rose in its entire splendor. An iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnas and the Andhakas. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. The hair and nails fell out, pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves in streams to wash themselves and their equipment. Silicone added, I have seen reports from 19th century AD archaeologists who excavated the Indus-Sarasvati city of Mohenjo-daro and found skeletons lying in the streets, some holding hands, as if grieving. But they didn't die in a flood. The skeletons had peculiar forms of cellular disintegration and were as radioactive as the Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims. Lumps of black glass littered the streets of Mohenjo-daro, which laboratory analysis showed to be clay containers that melted suddenly in intense heat. Sir, Silicone asked, how do you understand Vimana? I think of flying chariots or aerial crafts of shining metal, hovering or moving at will, with great speed, capability, and maneuverability, radiating sun-like light. Some were as large as flying cities floating high in the sky, while others traveled over land or beneath the seas. Most ancient records call them flying man-birds or winged chariots. Sir, Copper asked, were any Hindu gods associated with serpent symbolism? Some of the oldest known Sanskrit texts, Buddha said, speak of a serpent race descending from the skies, teaching humanity agriculture, pottery, astronomy, sciences, and the ways of virtuous living. These semi-divine Naga or Sarpa are often described as tall creatures with shining eyes, elongated faces, and bluish skin. One passage says the Naga descended on cloud-borne chariots from a cloudless sky. The Aryans migrants to northern Europe and their descendant Normans revered dragons that lived in underground layers, Silicone added. In Chinese mythology, Buddha said, dragons were the guardians of human civilization and were present at the time of creation, perhaps the first moments of the post-cataclysm world. They taught humans fire-making, weaving, and music. The Ven King describes the remote time when humans and wise dragons coexisted peacefully, and the dragons lived in the sky. The Chinese creator goddess Nu Kwa is half woman, half serpent. Central African myths tell of a serpent god called Olokan, Silicone said. A Japanese mythical god called Omano Nusha no Okamai, whose symbol is a serpent, is revered on Mount Miwa where he came from the sky to help the people who survived the cataclysm. Are any of the gods associated with death, war, and human skulls? Iron asked. Yes, Buddha replied, a few. Shiva, the destroyer god of victory, battle, and order is one. Often portrayed in battle gear and arms, engaging in aerial Vimana battles, crushing enemies or guiding his human followers. His consort is Kali, usually portrayed with a fierce expression, sunken eyes, and sagging skeletal body. Both Shiva and Kali are associated with obedience, fear, wrath, death, blood, eroticism, and sexual rituals. The Hindu myths call the current era the age of Kali or Kali Yuga. Once again, the brightening hues of dawn had begun to illuminate the world. Before we leave, Silicone said, is there any way we can be of service to you? Buddha smiled. You have done more than you realize, my dear colleagues. He smiled contentedly and resumed his meditating position. Just before the flash of light took them away, the travelers heard, farewell, my dear friends. Never lose heart. Once you have learned to focus on the wisdom of creation, then you shall find the way to your destination. Watchers, seekers, builders, and others. Soma Sema, the body is a tomb. Plato quoting Hermes, be as wise as serpents, gentle as doves. Jesus Christ, it was also regarded as the land of the giants. Giants formerly dwelt there, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place. Deuteronomy 2:20-21. And I will put enmity between thee and woman, and between thy seed and her seed, it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Yahweh to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3:15. W as the star's energy source, radioactive, electromagnetic, or something else unknown to our friends. Did the heavenly bodies Ka somehow generate it? How did the source give them that Ka? Was it some sort of interconnected universal energy or spirit? Did the star systems house humanoid entities? Were they more or less evolved? Could they travel beyond their physical worlds and visit other planets? What would their intentions and actions be in other worlds? How did all that, and they, relate to the source? Where was the source? Once again the friends awaited the rising sun and a journey into yet another unpredictable realm. Our time travelers felt a sense of eventuality, the gravity of an unknown source of wisdom, approaching and unfolding, screen by screen, like an intricate stage play nearing an inevitable last curtain. When hydrogen and silicone summoned them to the edge of the transportal, the sun was rising behind the soaring ice-capped Andes peaks. Soon, they appeared in a fascinating setting, a vast mountainous region. Pine trees indicated a high, dry climate. Mountain peaks ran in all directions, the highest ice blanketed and engulfed in cloud. Down in the gorge before them, a small river twisted and tumbled into a pristine blue lake. The dusk sunlight set the whole atmosphere ablaze with an orange-golden hue. Another lovely setting, oxygen was relieved. In the near distance, a small mansion of white marble walls and reddish-brown tiled roof topped a hill overlooking the lake. The group waded toward it. As they approached, they saw people roaming about. An old gardener, hair and long beard as white as his woolen cap, hesitantly snipped rosebuds in the beautifully groomed garden spreading from the heights of the hill. Household animals sat about, ruminating. A few magnificent horses stood near the colonnade of a small stable, contentedly shaking their tails. Marble stairs fanned like an exquisite scallop shell from the center of the mansion's entrance into the garden. On them a few men in loose cotton and leather riding garb sat, flipping small swords or bows in their hands. They were flirting with young maids, who did not seem to mind the guards' harmless humor as they dusted and arranged flowers and fruit in the hall. Colorful stained glass transoms crowned the hall's large wood-framed glass windows. Our friends drifted in, attracted by the ornate decor. The floor was a lattice of stone mosaic, exotic wood, and colored ceramic, separated by brass spacers. The tall, white marble columns supported a plastered ceiling intricately carved and painted shades of blue, red, white, then inlaid with exotic wood and gold or silver leaf. Everywhere large windows delivered light and revealed the serenity of the landscape, the mountains, the garden, and the lake. Tastefully ornate wooden furniture, colorful woven cushions, hammered brass and silver tables, and flowing silk and linen drapes filled the space. An elegant wooden harp, inlaid with ivory and brass, sat in a corner. A library of old leather-bound books occupied one wall. A large map covered another wall. On the other walls were paintings, one depicting a royal hunting scene, men on horses with bows, horsemen on a field, attracted everyone's attention. A man with a shining face, dressed in white robes, loose pants and a cap, arms outstretched to the sun, as if in prayer. The center of his chest seemed to glow with flame. The man's prayerful posture reminded them of Azidahaka and Akhenaten. Zarathustra. Silicone was bound to know. The maids lit incense, candles, and oil lamps as the daylight slowly faded. On a balcony at the rear of the hall stood 5 old men dressed in white robes, loose, wrinkled, baggy pants, colorful embroidered vests, and assorted types of hats. They stood in quiet awe of the energy radiating in every direction from the mountains, forest, lake, and setting sun. "It all looks pleasant and peaceful enough, doesn't it?" Sulfur ventured. "Where are we?" Iron asked. "Judging from the geography, the landscape, the decor, the clothing, that map, and the paintings, I would venture a guess that we're on the western Persian plateau, around 1500 years before our time." "Bravo!" An excited voice cried from within a piece of unusual mechanical furniture. "Excuse me. I am Mercury. What is that strange thing you're housed in?" Helium asked. "And arrows." Another showed playing polo. One painting a wonderful machine. "I am a liquid metal at ambient temperature, indeed the only one on the Earth's surface. My expansion and contraction in this glass tube, in response to atmospheric changes, moves gauges in the machine to indicate the temperature and barometric pressure." "An old weather indicator," Silicone concluded. "Please," Mercury said, "tell me who you are." After the introduction, another voice revealed its presence. "Please accept my sincere welcome and offer of assistance. I am Phosphorus." Phosphorus resided in a frosty residue covering the inside of a glass sphere on a high console. As the sunlight faded, our friends saw the dazzling light it emitted. "A lamp with no energy source," Gold gasped. "Except our natural luminescence," Phosphorus clarified. "Where are we?" Silicone asked. "As you said," Mercury replied, "in Persia. To be precise, you are in the mountain retreat of the Grand Vizier Bozorgmur, the Compassionate, in the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, about a day's ride east of Ctesiphon, the Sassanid capital. Bozorgmur is the first minister of known as meaning just, one of the greatest Sassanid kings. In fact, he will soon be here for a secret gathering." Persia, Silicone sighed, the land of mystery, wisdom, culture, and art. It gave the world Zoroastrianism, as well as history's first multinational administrative apparatus, the Achaemenid Empire founded by Cyrus. The land bridge that connected the Orient to the Occident, a strip of high mountainous plateau 400 miles wide, was for long the only accessible passage from Eastern Asia to the West. Hence, the Sassanid king Khosrow-Parviz, also Anushravan, widely reputed as Dagger the corridor for many conquerors throughout history, Persia was often hostage to its important geopolitical position. Yet it has absorbed the shocks and influenced every conquering race. A land of great Mercury resumed. Deserts, snowy mountain peaks, luxuriant river valleys. Unless you sail the Indian Ocean or cross north of the world's largest inland lake, the Caspian Sea, you must cross the Persian plateau. Thus the Silk Road passes through it. Its natural resources, strategic position, its mountains, deserts, and seas, gave it an important role in history when civilization spread from Asia around the world. Humans have inhabited it continuously since Paleolithic times. The high altitude and lower latitude made it a haven for northern Asian tribes fleeing the devastation in Siberia. Much Persian and Median mythology recalls the fleeing migrants. Long before the Aryans arrived, other small nations occupied the Middle East's fertile, temperate high plains. Their adobe ziggurats, 6 to 12 millennia old, dot the now arid Iranian plains and elsewhere in Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Middle East. More pyramid-like structures, Calcium observed. Khosrow's ancestor, Ardashir, the first of the Persian Sassanid dynasty, patched together a vast empire by overthrowing his predecessors, the Parthians. With the shadow of Rome looming nearby, the Sassanid kings tried to centralize control of their satrapies, including religious homogeneity in Zoroastrianism. Because times were hard, the rulers relied on religion to control and mobilize the masses. For the first time we know of, most of the imperial subjects adhered to a single faith. Although pre-Christianity Roman geographical contrasts, forests, fertile plains, empire was religiously diverse, the Sassanid promoted an official state religion. The Orthodox Zoroastrian establishment and chief priest Kartir stood behind the throne of the first Sassanid, Shapur I, 270 to 272 AD, and the next three Sassanid emperors. Under the fanatical watch of Kartir, an official Orthodox version of Zoroastrianism flourished. Shapur restored a portion of the old Achaemenid Empire and brought many Western Asian peoples and faiths under its rule. Historical factors made it prudent to abandon tolerance and impose religious uniformity. The Persians chose Orthodox Zoroastrianism, the Romans a version of Christianity. Phosphorus regained the lead. Not so long ago, the Central Asian Huns and Ephtalite took King Piruz by surprise, defeated, captured, and killed him in battle. His son, Kavayad I had to pay hefty tribute that caused economic hardship. Combined with a drought, the times deepened peasant dissatisfaction with the rigid social caste system. The popular revolutionary Mazdaki movement, a socialistic socio-economic form of Zoroastrianism, shook the empire to its core. But the empire's foundations were already shaky, and in the next century Islam toppled the Sassanid and Byzantine control of Western Asia. Salman the Parsi, Persian, the son of an exiled Mazdaki official, and Muhammad's close associate, invited the young Sassanid king Khosrow to accept Islam, but his invitation was torn up. Salman is famed for devising the universal Arabic alphabet and language. Salman and a Hebrew mobilize a social reform movement to crumble the Byzantine and Sassanid empires once and for all. The Quran appears to contain much of the Mazdaki socio-economic doctrines and the Old Testament's mythical and spiritual heritage. Whatever Islam's true origins were, the Sassanid peasant armies, inspired by standardizing the scholars set out to Islam's promises of social equity, refused to fight the invading Muslim holy warriors. Islamic armies swept away opposition, and the raiders chipped away a Byzantine Empire's Asian and North African colonies in a century, and then added the Iberian Peninsula in the next. The dream of Salman and his Judean colleague was partially realized by religious fervor. Nevertheless, Silicone pointed out, the Persians never accepted Islamic rule, especially since it did little to improve people's social conditions. A sudden commotion overcame the mansion. The maids hastened to finish their chores. The 5 old men on the balcony re-entered the hall and walked to the main entrance. The sound of riders approaching from a distance grew steadily louder. Our friends soon saw 50 or so fancily dressed, fully armored, riders escort an ornate armored carriage flying an embroidered silk banner. Once the party reached the outer grounds, the carriage and a half-dozen riders approached the building, while the rest assumed positions around the compound. Then 2 riders split from the group and galloped around the Hilltop Palace's ring road, evaluating the security conditions. After conferring with the palace guards, they rejoined the carriage. Soon they were all at the entrance stairway. Our friends watched through the large glass windows as assistants opened the carriage door and set out a small stool for the passenger. Out came Khosrow Anishravan, king of kings and emperor of the lands under Persian Sassanid subjugation. A tall man with long, graying black hair and mustache, he wore a dark royal blue velvet cape emblazoned with royal insignia and white and gold tunic and trousers. He wore a purple and gold velvet headdress, topped with a golden pin showing Farvihar, the winged disc image of the new Islamic Caliphate, significant chunk of the Zoroastrian Ahura Mazda, superimposed on a horned golden sun disc. At his side hung a jeweled dagger. He held an engraved, jewel-studded golden ceremonial scepter. He stepped onto the stool, and out of the carriage with slow grace. Everyone stood and bowed. Something unusual struck our watchful friends. As Khosrow walked up the stairs and approached the bowing old men, his arrogance became overshadowed by respect. One by one, the older men kissed the seal ring on the king's right index finger as he touched their right shoulders gently with his left. Each in turn saluted him with the same phrase, "Blessings upon your royal highness." Khosrow embraced the last man like a father and walked inside, the elders following. "Who is the last old man the king embraced?" Silver asked. "The Grand Vizier Bozorgmur," Phosphorus answered. "He has been Khosrow's mentor and teacher since childhood and his first minister and advisor since he assumed the crown. When Khosrow stabilized the Mazdaki era's chaos, Bozorgmur's wise policies restored order and prosperity. He undertook economic reforms, promoted scholarship, and helped make the Gandhi Shapur Academy and Library a world-famous center of learning. Despite the early turmoil, Bozorgmur's reforms made Khosrow's reign a time of enlightened stability. The king and the 5 older men walked to a distinguished armchair, slightly raised above 5 smaller but equally ornate chairs, around a mahogany table on which lay fruits, sweets, candles, books, and notebooks. Looming above them on a high pedestal was the phosphorus-laced lamp, glowing magically in the dusk. Khosrow Parvez pointed at the lamp. "Bozorgmur, when are you going to give me this magic lantern?" "Your Highness," the minister replied, "this trifle is not worthy of your household, though it illuminates my nightly chores." Khosrow laughed. "Bozorgmur, my genius diplomat." Khosrow sat in the big armchair, the others took their seats, and an eerie calm befell the room. "So, Bozorgmur, this is where you seek refuge from the madness of court? Delightful. Here I feel closer to the abode of Ahura Mazda. Indeed, your Highness, the Lord's glory inhabits this landscape." Khosrow glanced at each of the other 4. "I wish to thank you all," Khosrow said to his hosts, "for honoring my request to attend your meeting. I feel privileged to be here. Bozorgmur has told me of your identities and origins. Please rest assured, I recognize you as learned scholars. Scholarship is a far more distinguished and deserving enterprise than inheriting wealth and power. I envy your freedom to seek truth. I have heard of your secret meetings. I asked Bozorgmur about them. He suggested I come to this year's meeting. Rest assured, I do not seek to know who you are. I vow on the honor the Lord Ahura Mazda bestowed on me that what is said and done here tonight, I will not reveal. You may speak freely." Bozorgmur responded. "Your Highness, your presence and interest makes us proud." "Very well then. Introduce me to your distinguished colleagues." "Please forgive us," Bozorgmur said, "if we are secretive. The men are prominent figures where they live and work. Some live under rulers who would persecute them and their families if they knew what they think and teach. They would be accused of heresy. One cannot be too prudent these days." Khosrow nodded his understanding. "Perhaps a little background will help. I first met these gentlemen when we were schoolboys during the reign of your father, King Kavayad, at that marvel of the world, Gandhi Shapur Academy. We quickly developed a brotherly bond." Khosrow smiled coyly. "A secret brotherhood. One dedicated only to enlightenment, your Highness. We correspond regularly around and beyond the empire. Our scholarly association has been a source of reflection, discourse, and inspiration for us. We have shared much knowledge and probed many mysteries. One of the men interjected. And other worldly mysteries. Over the years, Bozorgmer continued, we have risen to important social responsibility. Many years ago, we agreed to meet annually on this night. As our studies have evolved through the years, our meetings have become controversial in the view of some, so we conduct our research secretly. We call ourselves the Seekers, another added. I still prefer the heretics, another riposted. Why heretics? The king asked. Bozorgmer reached for an explanation. Your Highness, as understanding of history, philosophy, astronomy, and the natural sciences enlighten the mind, blind adherence to unquestioned religious dogma becomes impossible. We try to understand the anomalies of faith and religion. We study rare manuscripts and ancient texts. Bozorgmer introduced the men. I am proud and privileged to introduce my friends, brothers, and colleagues, whose light of wisdom I hope one day will illuminate the far corners of the world. To the far left is Gnostic from a Christian city in Byzantine Anatolia, a hotbed of heretical Christians. Gnostic bowed slightly. Your Highness. Next to him is Mithraist from Lake Van in eastern Anatolia. To his right is Manichaean from our satrapy Babylon. Finally my friend Kabbalist, a rabbi and scholar of Orthodox and esoteric Judaism from Roman-occupied Phoenicia. And what do they call you, Bozorgmer? The king asked. We call him Magus, Your Highness. Is there a particular field of inquiry that interests Your Highness? Bozorgmer initiated. Khosrow rose from his chair and walked to the window where he stood gazing at the darkening sky. I want to know how true our religion really is. Can anyone say with certainty that the blood of my persecuted subjects has washed away ignorance? Or does ignorance spill innocent blood? After several moments of contemplative silence, Bozorgmer began the evening's lengthy discussion. According to legend, many millennia ago our ancestors survived a mysterious devastation and migrated from their distant northern homeland, Arianaveja. Our ancestors migrated here around 2,000 years ago. They held complex mythical allegories as sacred oral verses. Zarathustra taught nothing he conceived himself or learned from Ahura Mazda, as our priests preach. Rather, Zarathustra resurrected and transcribed the ancient Aryan traditions. Later, the ancient Mesopotamian mystery traditions influenced mystical Zoroastrianism, Bozorgmer said. So let me review some Aryan myths. The creation myths describe the world as round and flat, a disk. The sky was not vast and endless, they thought, but a hard enveloping shell or crystal. The myths say the world was in a perfect state, a fertile plain with few valleys or mountains. Maybe Siberia was Arianaveja, Carbon proposed. Bozorgmer continued. The myths report a sudden dramatic shift in the cosmic geography, something that made them think the heavenly bodies had fallen. Afterward came a period of rain and transformations. Before the upheavals, they believed that beyond the peak of Mount Alborz, in the northern lands, was the Geokarana tree, a tree of knowledge, which bore the elixir of immortality, and the tree of life from which all life sprang. The great bird Senmerv shook the tree of life to spread the seeds of life. Then rain formed 3 great and 20 small seas and 2 rivers running east and west from a central mountainous region to the ends of the earth and into the vast cosmic ocean. Humans, the legends say, could no longer pass from one region to another, unless they rode on the back of Srishik, the heavenly bull. Gopat Shah, the half-man/half-ox god, guarded the new world but was forced to leave. It will return to sacrifice itself on the final day of renovation, when all men will become immortal. A later text, the Bundashan, describes Ahriman breaking through the sky and destroying everything. For 90 days spiritual beings battled material demons, an apparent victory for Ahriman. But when he tried to return to his home, the spirits of the sky and of humanity, Faravash spirits, helped Ahura Mazda defeat and imprison Ahriman on Mount Alborz. Then the star Sirius produced rains that restored life on earth. The name of this mythically mysterious star, Sirius/Sirus, defines spirit of wisdom in Old Persian. How could a distant star support life on Earth? Why would they come up with such notions? Silicon prompted, cosmic battles, the wars of immortals, and the support of life on Earth by the star system Sirius. A mere 8.6 light-years away, it has indeed inspired many global myths. What do such creation myths have to do with religion? The king said. Our ancient ancestors believed that the true nature of universal creation transcends good and evil. Evil, as we understand it, appears to be a more recent phenomenon. Dualism, a late Zoroastrian doctrine, suggests that two fundamentally opposed forces are at work in the universe: truth and order struggle with lie and disorder. But who says what is true and what is not, the gods or the clergy? Contemporary Avestic scriptures present good/light and evil/darkness as separate opposing concepts/entities, not different aspects of the same reality as our ancestors believed. Evidently, Bozorgmer went on, good cannot control evil until some end of the world time. What all-powerful creator cannot control its creation? Whereas, ancient myths vividly describe cosmic warfare between unearthly entities, the mythical gods. Mani Cheen added, a portrayal of ancient eras that is distorted through the ages, perhaps. Bozorgmer paused for a moment, picked up his notes, briefly reviewed them and then continued, in a rare diagram, reproduced from an ancient cave drawing in the Zagros Mountains, I saw that the cave's occupants associated life with the head, heart, and several other bodily chakras in combination with undecipherable words, and the symbolism of serpents. Whereas, the forces of evil/darkness were associated with the skull, vulture's claws, torturous existence, and death. Were these just hallucinations of supposedly primitive people? Or, were they some complex mysterious beliefs of our post-cataclysmic surviving ancestors, who were taking refuge in those caves? Mithraist added, curiously, contemporary Zoroastrianism associates the serpent with Azidahaka, Zahak, an angel of the supposedly evil Angramenyu, Ahriman. Our friends looked at each other with a sense of déjà vu. Contemporary Zoroastrian doctrines treat the good and evil forces/angels, quite differently than most ancient sources, even the very ones from which Zoroastrianism was derived. Bozorgmer glanced at his quiet colleagues and the king. Then, he drank some tea from a slender delicate red and clear crystal glass, and continued, it is commonly preached that Ahura Mazda created the world, light and darkness, earth and heavens, men and creatures, and everything else. He controls the course of the heavens, and men's destiny, rewards, and punishments, sleep and activity, and so on. However, in some rare ancient manuscripts Lord Mazda is often described in naturalistic terms. He is often described as a fair shining man, wearing a star-decked cloak, and strange ambiguous references to his swift horse Sun, keeping an eye upon the earth. His throne is in the celestial lights in the highest heaven, where he holds court and his ministering angels carry out his commands. Contemporary Zoroastrian description of Ahura Mazda's angels and the evil Deva of Angramenyu is a long and familiar subject. The forces of evil are often described as the worst existence, the house of lie, the realm of cold and darkness, etc. The disciples of Ahriman can change their outward form and appear as a dragon, snake, or a youth. It is preached that Azidahaka, Zahak, from whose body grows serpents, once corrupted humans with his lie. However, as my friends and I have been researching certain ancient traditions, it appears that this lie seems to have been the revealing and teaching of sacred ancient knowledge. Kabbalist interjected, lest one eats the sacred apples from the tree of knowledge. Bozorgmer continued, the affinities of some commonly worshipped Zoroastrian deities are quite bizarre. Ancient Magi scriptures clearly correlate the goddess Anahita with the ancient female earthly fertility symbols. The Aryan war god, Varethragna, who defeated the legendary seven-headed monster dragon/serpent, took the form of a great bird of prey, with iron feet, tail, and wings, and killed with such ferocity that the bones, hair, blood, and flesh of enemies were unrecognizable. Again our friends looked at each other with that strange sense of prior familiarity. Mani Chin, and how about the whole bizarre story of man's creation from the recycled ruins of a post-apocalyptic Earth? Where the dying of a sacred bull yielded the seeds of plants and animals. And from the ancient man's metal body, the Lord created the first man, Adam, and his wife. Gnostic, Orthodox Zoroastrian scriptures then vaguely tell us how these first race of humans is supposedly corrupted by Ahriman. Here again, we see a similarity with the Old Testament. Bozorgmer continued, let's have a look at ancient Zoroastrian eschatology and the events following physical death. They believe the soul hovers around the deceased body for 3 days, contemplating its life. After 3 nights, the soul goes to the house of judgment where its deeds are weighed before Mitra and his disciples Sriyasha and Rashnu, who send the soul either to an intermediate place, called Hamstagan. Not heaven or hell, as contemporary religious beliefs hold, but an eternal dwelling, rather training, or rehabilitation. The ideas are similar beliefs outlined in the Book of the Dead, Kabbalist noted. The god Anubis metaphorically measures the deceased's heart in a scale. All this sounds fantastic, Khosrow said. What about it? I don't exactly know, Your Highness, the vizier replied. In any case, the ancient dealings with creation, God's human purpose and conduct, and afterlife seem out of context with contemporary religious definitions of good or evil, human servitude, and heaven and hell. The scriptures are also vague about the day of renovation. How so? The monarch asked. Ancient Chaldean astronomical charts predict the world will last a specific number of years from an unknown past date. When moral decline, disintegration of family and social life, and disrespect for truth, love, compassion, and faith mark the end times, accompanied by cosmic and natural calamities. The sun and the moon will dim, as earthquakes, droughts, famine, and storms shake the earth, conditions not unlike those at the time of the world's birth. Bozorgmer paused, glanced at the mesmerized king, and continued, in the end, an event resembling a shower of stars is said to mark the end time. When the Savior Ashadar, born of a virgin and the holy seed, the bringer of peace and righteousness, will appear to guide humanity. Kabbalist, the Judeo-Christian signs of the end time, the apocalypse, and the coming of the Messiah. Contemporary Zoroastrian Avesta describes a renovated world where humanity will live peacefully, eating only spiritual food. But, only the worthy will pass a place for further. To ancient Egyptian across the bridge of judgment and through the stream of molten metal, which will sweep over everything and purify all men to uniform perfect purity. Yet the ancient geological descriptions differ from these orthodox scriptures. Bozorgmer turned the discussion. I have outlined some awkward anomalies between ancient Aryan beliefs and the contemporary Zoroastrian dogma. There is also a link with Babylonian philosophies, and that is the specialty of my colleague. He turned to his white-haired friend, the Mani Chin. Most people are familiar with the history of Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, and Babylon. The Sumerian civilization appeared 7 to 8 millennia ago with unprecedented knowledge of pottery, construction, metallurgy, agriculture, domesticated crops and animals, irrigation, medical sciences, geometry, astronomy, and the bureaucratic apparatus to administer itself. They knew of the planets and the star constellations and had an elaborate spiritual philosophy that influenced future religions. The Assyrians of Nineveh continued the Sumerian fascination with astronomy, as did others. Later, within the flourishing Babylonian centers of scholarship, Egyptian mystery traditions and geometry, Sumerian astronomy, Babylonian numerology, and Hebrew esotericism met the Magi's magical arts. The Babylonians thought the universe had neither beginning nor end but recycled endlessly. The Chaldeans deified time and gave us a solar calendar and units of time. They configured the zodiac. Their need to define very large and small numbers led to the abstract concepts of zero and infinity. One area of the Chaldean astronomers' work still remains ambiguous and controversial. They call it the Great Year. It is the inspiration behind the zodiac. It is a 25,920-year cycle, where the sun's yearly movement seems to pass through a 360-degree rotation, 1 degree for every 72 years through the 12 houses of the zodiac, meaning 2,160 years for each house. They are talking about the cyclical rotational wobble of Earth around its polar axis, called precession, Silicone added. Besides its mystifying complexity, what is so controversial about this great year? Khosrow asked. Mani Cheen replied, some rare heretical texts correlate this cyclical earthly movement with the cycles of destruction and rebirth. Maybe, such phenomenon influenced historical events, and our ancestors' myths about the world's beginning and end. That may also explain the Chaldean astronomers' fascination with studying the heavenly bodies. As well as the Egyptians, Copper noted. And the Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas, Gold added. Bozorgmer continued. The early encounters between the Magi and the Chaldean scholars evolved both their respective beliefs. Although, such influence was strongly resisted by the Orthodox Zoroastrian Puritans. Mani Cheen steered the conversation. Nowhere was this more evident than with the Zurvan heresy. Zurvan philosophy was influenced by the astronomical conceptions of the Chaldeans. Zurvan Akhavan, the essence of boundless and infinite time/fate, is seen as the original creator of all. Whereas Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu are lower entities, battling each other for dominion over this world. They believed that the universe evolved from a formless primeval matter, defined as infinite time and space, into all that has form and is finite. It believed the true origin and destination of the human spirit to be from the distant star constellations, but held captive by the heavenly spheres. Hence, the fate of humanity resided in its struggle with the forces of darkness/matter exerted on it. This materialistic fatalism had a profound influence on the future Mitraism and Manichaeism. As well Socrates, esoteric faiths of the European Middle Ages, and the Islamic mystics and Sufis. Mitra was originally an ancient Aryan god. With the blending of Persian and Babylonian mythologies, Mitra became the sun god, Shamash, to form the trinity along with Anahita, Ishtar, and Ahura Mazda, Bel, Mithraists said. Similar to the Egyptian gods Horus, Isis, and Osiris, and the inspiration behind the virgin birth of Silicone Judaism, the added, Pythagoras. Cathar and Bogomil Jesus and the Christian Holy Trinity, added. Mitraism resembled both with Zurvan ideas. Rome's the Gnostic astrology reconcile Babylonian attempt to adapting and superimposing different cults' mythical elements. Some say that had the Romans not selected Christianity, their second obvious choice would have been the cult of Mithras. Mithraist temples followed the major trade routes of Europe and Asia Minor as far north as Scotland and Germany and as far south as North Africa. They contained various representations of Mithras, usually a combination of animals arranged as the constellations named for them relate to one another. Mithras, a sun deity, is shown as a vigorous young man sacrificing a winged bull, in the presence of a serpent, eagle, dog, whose ritual sacrifice brings forth new life. Mysteriously, the representational layout of this cast of characters is almost always identical to the positions of the constellations Orion, Taurus, Aquila, Canis Major, and Draco. Many races, cults, and religions meant to me, the Mithraist went on, astrological representations likely refer to specific events and dates in remote antiquity. I suggest the temple art is a diagrammatical representation of actual historic events in zodiac symbols. As for eschatology, the speaker continued, Mithraism believed that human souls descend into the world at birth with the goal of ascending out of the world again through 7 heavenly gates corresponding to the planets they knew. Let me read you something I recently found in an ancient manuscript. The Mithraist picked up his papyrus notebook, and read, there is a sign of the orbits in heaven, the one being that of the fixed stars, and the other that assigned to heavenly bodies, and of the soul's passage through these. The symbol is this. There is a ladder with 7 gates and at its top is an 8th gate. He then put down his notebook, and looked at colleagues and an intrigued Khosrow. The Kabbalist took up the thread. When ancient Canaan was conquered and some its populace deported to Assyria, their descendants learned of the Median Magi mysteries and Mesopotamian mythology. When Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem, sacked the famous temple, and deported another portion of its population to Babylon, their captivity faiths Egyptian and Mesopotamian beliefs. The Book of Daniel portrays Daniel as a high priest in the court of King Darius in Susa. Doubtless the Mesopotamian philosophies influenced the old led them to combine their Canaanite origins with Testament and inspired Jewish fringe cults, like the Merkabah and Kabbalah mysticism. The captivity introduced the Jews to the concepts of creation and end days, a divine trinity, dualism, pantheism, numerology, and astrology. Before the exile in Babylon, the concepts of Satan and serpent symbolism were absent. When King Artaxerxes I asked Ezra to reassemble lost Jewish literary and religious heritage, much Chaldean and Zoroastrian influence entered. The Kabbalist paused, sipped tea, and continued. Everyone here knows the legend of the sea invaders, supposedly the ancestors of the Hellenes. Less than 2 millennia ago, the Hyksos invaded by sea and laid waste to Western Asia, Phoenicia, Syria, and Egypt. Phoenician and Hebrew captives and refugees reached the Aegean Islands. Later contact with Judean and Phoenician merchants also influenced Hellenic mythology and religion. Shamash and Ishtar became Apollo and Aphrodite. Ahura Mazda, Bel, and Baal reincarnated as Adonis, and Athena is the Canaanite Anat, Persian Anahita or Egyptian Isis. The twin pillars of Greek temple entrances resemble Canaanite and Hebrew structures or Egyptian obelisks. The Greeks also adopted many abstract belief systems from their eastern neighbors, the Manichaean added. Like the Persian Zervan, the Greek Cronus is often represented as a winged serpent, with multiple heads of a bull, lion, and a humanoid god, growing upon him. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh is one of the world's oldest stories. Gilgamesh was a legendary Sumerian king, born of a human and a god, a demigod, who yearned for divine immortality. Following many adventures along a journey with his disciple, Enkidu, whom Gilgamesh converted from ape-man to civilized man. The flood hero Utnapishtim tells him of a secret plant of immortality in the underworld. A serpent denies him access as unworthy. Utnapishtim then advises Gilgamesh to go home and be content to live as a human, for the life of a god is only for a god, the Kabbalists said. Many later belief systems refer to such remote historical events and half-man/half-animal deities, like the lion, the heavenly bull, the serpent, or birds of prey. Hence Zeus' battle with the serpentine titans, flood myths, bull or dragon-slaying heroes like Hercules, Samson, Shamash, or Gilgamesh. Like Gilgamesh, Homer's Iliad could conceivably be construed as a coded reference to Chaldean astronomy, mythology, and geography. To me, the Gnostic broke in. The puzzling question is, why did the Roman Christian establishment censure classical Greek philosophy? They could have learned a lot. When the Hellenic authorities rebuked Anaxagoras for teaching Persian astronomy and philosophy, he said, God, or the universal mind, is a fire endowed with supreme intelligence. The entire universe is a single eternal living being. The Roman Mithras cults derived much from the Platonic school, the Mithraist noted. In his Republic, he went on, Plato refers to the Babylonian Sar, a numeral equivalent for the period between global catastrophes where the stars and 7 planets are aligned as they were at the time of creation. The Essene broke away from Orthodox Judaism, which they claimed was ancient Egyptian wisdom, mostly Akhenaten's teachings. The Essene influenced the Apostle Paul. They saw human existence as a battle between the forces of light and darkness, between body and spirit. They knew ancient Asian lore. Kabbalist picked up the thread. Several Jewish movements created mystical Judaism, the Kabbalists said, and preserved such mysterious relics as the Sefer Yetzirah that supposedly outlines the true nature of God, the universe, and its paths of wisdom. The pictogram of Sefer Yetzirah is three-dimensional and combines numeric, alchemical, and astrological principles. Of the mystery of Sefer Yetzirah, Job 23 says, "Know and believe that the serpent was indispensable to the order of the world." And it is the mystery of Tili, serpent, revealed in the Sefer Yetzirah. It is he, who taught how the spheres move, and what turns from east to west, and north to south. This is the mystery of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That is why Yahweh forbade Adam to touch this tree of knowledge. So long as the good and evil are linked together, reputedly, Abraham painstakingly guarded, and transferred such perplexing complexity for the future generations. "I think it is time we took up Gnosticism," the eponymous speaker said. "For that we go back to Alexandria and its academy and library, which contained much of the classical world's wisdom. Buddhist monks, Greek scholars, Persian mystics, and Jewish thinkers mixed freely in its halls, where new esoteric creeds centered on ancient mystery traditions evolved. They affirmed union with the divine through special knowledge, vouchsafed to very few. Union with the source of all creation? Where do we sign up?" Helium blurted. "In Alexandria, science, philosophy, and metaphysics merged to understand how to harmonize all experience with the planet or the universe and appropriate their energy. The Gnostics chose secrecy, because they were often at odds with the power structure of their time. In the case of Rome, the cults were popular for a while, and traces of their influence linger here and there. In the early Jerusalem Christian Church the Gnostic continued. The apostles recognized Gnosticism as the single-minded pursuit of one's own will to transcend the concept and the boundaries of morality. I have found much similarity between Gnosticism and Hellenic, Magi, Chaldean, Jewish, and Egyptian mysticism. Although their ideologies are quite controversial, it is worth noting a few here, as it applies to tonight's discussion. The Gnostics apply a radical dualistic interpretation of the Old Testament, interpreting the Bible in reverse. Yahweh, the God of this material world, is said to be an impostor of the true Creator, who lies above and beyond this material worldly creation. Yahweh, the God ruling this world, is in reality a vengeful warrior demon, ignorantly worshipped by the masses. While, the one mistakenly accused as being evil was in truth a benevolent God. The Gnostics believed the true Creator had sent the Zoroaster, Moses, Jesus, and Buddha, to combat the invasive influence of demonic gods on earth. This battle had continued since the time of Moses and Zoroaster, and was supposedly still continuing between Yahweh and Jesus, emissary of the true Creator, the God of wisdom, Sophia. Gnosticism attracted Jewish mystics, forbidden by Jewish orthodoxy to practice mystery traditions. Still, the resemblance of some of their theories and symbolism to earlier systems is uncanny. Some Gnostics believed that the God of light liberated men by sending the serpent to guide them to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. The Gnostics were first called Nas-Ni, derived from the Hebrew Nas, serpent, just as Ophite comes from the Greek ophis, again serpent. Some believed Jesus was not God but rather a mortal with a divine message aimed at restoring Judaism to its Egyptian roots. At any rate, why did almost all heterodox Jewish movements like the Essenes and the Nazi rights revere serpent symbolism? Whatever his reasons, the Apostle Peter fought tirelessly, and ruthlessly, against the Gnostic doctrine. Following the crucifixion of Jesus, though there was considerable confusion among those who believed something about Jesus, the attempt to incorporate faith in him within the context of Judaism failed, and the more universal scope of Jesus' mission that Paul taught alone gathered sufficient adherents to create a viable religious institution, the Church. That Christian church moved outward and soon reached Rome, where it appealed mightily to the religiously perfervid masses but also to many among the rich and powerful. In Constantine's era the Council of Nicaea declared Jesus Christ divine, one of three persons of the triune God, articulated as Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Constantine, you recall, saw a radiant sign in the night sky bearing the Latin inscription in hoc signo vinces. The next morning, Constantine's troops painted the sign on their shields and won a victory that gained him the imperial throne. Though Constantine dabbled in other cults, Christianity became Rome's official religion, and the emperor was baptized on his deathbed. Roman Christianity adopted much of the symbolism of Mithras and Apollo, and echoes of earlier religions. The Christian New Testament was selected from among a vast outpouring of writings about Jesus, much of which tried to claim him as the fulfillment of first one or then another ancient cults following Constantine, bishops for control of the church. Once Christianity was the state religion, other variations of Christianity were condemned and relegated to the rank of heresies. The church over time persecuted dissenters and burned their books, all in the name of God. The militant Christian church has, through the centuries, repeated that ugly history long delayed expectations. The emperor vied with was the sign of Constantine, a cross. Why did the cross become Christianity's primary symbol? Khosrow interposed. Reputedly, Constantine saw the labarum, the Gnostic said, a chi, x, rho, p, within a circle. Its name and shape echo the five-shaped double X, laburs, a symbol of the cult of Zeus. The Greeks also used the chi as an abbreviation for Saturn, just like the wheel-shaped sign formed by imposing chi upon Rho. Ezekiel's wheel inside a wheel, the Kabbalist murmured. I have seen the plus symbol superimposed on a sphere, the Mithraist said, with the lion-headed youth with the coiled serpent on it which identifies it with Ahriman or Satan, not the Christian Church. Countless meanings attached to the cross, Bozorgmer said. The Chaldeans related it to the star Sirius. The Egyptians symbolized Isis with a cross. To the ancient Sumerians it symbolized the heavenly place, the abode of the gods. The ancient Highland Zoroastrian Magi associated it with the force of light, purity, and goodness, as did the Chaldeans, Egyptians, and the Hindu yogi. What you say is interesting, Khosrow responded. I recall the night, when you showed me the constellations through your crystal device. The brightest stars looked like blue-white crosses. Bozorgmer smiled. I am flattered that you recall your school days. Perhaps the cross reminded them of their spiritual origin and destiny among the stars. Or maybe the place of their teacher gods, the Kabbalists suggested. Please explain. Your Highness, let me describe some of the myth sources. Although much of the Old and New Testaments are historical, they were written down long after the events they report. After the Babylonian exile, the Old Testament texts were recompiled from memory, with perhaps some Chaldean and Zoroastrian overlay. Jewish religious orthodoxy rejected a good many, such as those dealing with Sefer Yetzirah, as foreign to Jewish scripture. Those who disagreed, including Nazarenes, Gnostics, and Copts, gathered, copied, and guarded the non-canonical works and disguised them to preserve their identity, message, and content. They are known as the Old Testament Apocrypha and include many works rejected by both Jewish and Christian authorities. Some of them teach that the descendants of Cain kept traditions imparted to them before the flood, by the sons of God, the legendary Book of Enoch's Watchers, or fallen angels, who taught men forbidden knowledge when they descended on earth from heaven. Yahweh, the story goes, sent Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael to wage war, capture, and punish them. Some of the heretical books deal with other subjects. Obelisks or poles, sacred trees, for example, many used as symbols of these teacher gods, or some mysterious body of wisdom. The Canaanite Asherah may lie behind the Hebrew tree of knowledge. So what did Adam and Eve really learn from it? Was it some ancient sacred and forbidden knowledge? Whatever's the case, idolized poles symbolize Israel's penchant for syncretism, and King Hezekiah pleased Yahweh by knocking down the sacred pillars and destroying a replica of the bronze serpent Moses carried in the Exodus when people worshipped it. One wonders if ancient human civilizations revered the serpent as a symbol of some heavenly constellation like Draco? Or is there more to it? Kabbalist added. Satan in Hebrew actually means adversary, not evil. And the Hebrew word Beelzebub is derived from Baal-zebub meaning Lord of the Flies, or Lord of those who fly. The book of Isaiah relates to Satan, as a fallen angel, from the domain of the bright morning star. Draco marks the sky of the North Pole, Bozorgmer noted. Or perhaps the legends refer to Sirius, the morning star. Sirius, the Gnostic said, is the morning star since it rises in the east with the sun. Lucifer, a name often associated with the devil, means bearer of light. Is that not the meaning of the Persian word div? Khosrow asked. Div, the vizier replied, and the Hindu word diva derive from the Aryan word devata, the shining ones. Another Aryan word for angel, farishte, roughly translates as the shining beings. Mithraist added. The likely symbolism of angels, as shining beings with round halos around their heads, just like mitras before them. Perhaps, shining, winged, message. But what? Well, the Gnostic said, the affinities are endless. Serpent/dragon symbolism was everywhere in the ancient world. The Gnostics and the Essenes associated Christ with serpent symbolism. One of their insignia is a crucified serpent with the face of Christ. Many groups associate serpents or dragons with ancient wisdom. Here's something I have never understood, Bozorgmer said. Cuneiform tablets discovered in the plains of Elam and Sumer describe a mountainous plain, settled long ago by godlike beings, the Watchers, who guided the human survivors of some cataclysm. They possessed unimaginable technologies, tools, and invisible weapons. They seemed to know how to, the Kabbalists suggested. These flying messengers carried a sacred produce, nutrients from the ground, by using advanced agricultural methods. They lived in a guarded compound that was defended by mystifying powers. They were described as having interacted with early humanity. Unfortunately, the tablets are broken and provide no further information, but other Sumerian tablets claim their ancestors learned much from magnanimous gods who departed at some point. Perhaps, that inspired the myth of Eden and humanity's loss of contact with God. They were represented by serpent symbols. Sumerian tombs contain serpentine deity figurines. I think it is time to recall the legend of Thoth, said the Gnostic. According to Plato, the Egyptian god Thoth lived in the Egyptian region of Naucratis before the flood. He gets credit for teaching humanity numerology, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, writing, medicine, alchemy, as well as music and games. He first taught humanity about the constellations, the zodiac, and the way the earth wobbles. His symbol was a winged staff around which coiled two serpents, the caduceus. Before the flood, his wisdom was written on two pillars made of different materials buried in a deep underground vault, the Aryan Var. The Egyptian priesthood guarded his secrets and could not divulge such wisdom in writing. Other records describe complex systems for human development and salvation from the physical body. They reveal laws dealing with the inner workings of a realm beyond the physical. Alchemy is the catch-all label for such lore. Most of it is attributed to the Watchers, the fallen angels, tree of knowledge, and serpent/dragon symbolism. Alchemy claims to reveal the secrets of the human soul, its original immortal state, its relationship with the universe, and its route to salvation. Yes, gentlemen, faith, as it should truly be, one that delivers enlightenment. The coded language for such salvation according to the Alexandrian alchemist Zosimus was, the attainment and comprehension of the philosopher's stone, this precious thing, which has no value, this polymorphous thing, which is known to all. The symbol often presented for this concept was a flaming heart, whether winged or not. Carbon excitedly prompted. This is exactly what my old cave companion's god, Azidahaka, was holding in his hand. Khosrow removed his velvet purple headdress and looked at the golden pin attached to it. The image of Ahura Mazda, a winged priest who held out a circle, floated over a horned sun disk. Your Highness, the vizier told his student, the image of Ahura Mazda, which looks like a vested Achaemenid Zoroastrian priest, changed during the era of King Darius after the heretic Magi were purged. The image of the Lord Mazda during Cyrus' reign was quite different. The winged cape was more pronounced and detailed. And the crown was more like a tight metal helmet topped by a horned ornament. It was a lot like the Elamite god Ashushanak, the Sumerian Enki, and the Egyptian Osiris. Khosrow smiled at his beloved mentor. "Gentlemen," he said, "I have heard a lot from you, but I still am not quite sure of anything. If that includes all dogma of any kind, Your Highness, that is exactly what is intended. Indeed, bureaucracy defines the world of nation builders. I am bound to my role and responsibilities," the King of Kings sighed. "You, gentlemen, are seekers of truth and wisdom. And you Bozorgmur, my dear mentor and Grand Vizier, what are you, a seeker or a builder?" Bozorgmur bowed his head and diplomatically replied. "Your Highness, I am just a humble loyal guardian of the others." Our friends noticed that the first rays of sunlight had touched the serene mountain lake, illuminating its dark royal bluish hue. That signaled our friends' return to their realm. The almost invisible darkness. A good planet is hard to find. A San Francisco bumper sticker: "The world is ruled by very different powers from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." Benjamin Disraeli. The last aristocrats, men from a single social and religious caste, whose very existence is not suspected by the man in the street. Roger Peyrefitte, Knight of Malta. Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. Jean-Jacques Rousseau: "News is what someone wants to suppress. Everything else is publicity." Ruaven Frank, former head of NBC News. Back at the mountaintop cave, the group was unwinding from their voyage. Lead almost had to shout to get everyone's attention. Would someone shed some light on everything we just witnessed? By habit, everyone turned to Silicon. "Believe me, I am also at odds with our experiences and encounters. I hope all this will lead to the universal sign," Oxygen sighed. "Indeed. Evidently people have always searched for the source." Helium humored. "Unless like these humans we have a few millennia to spare, we better find that universal sign soon." "I'd say our inquiry is kin to religion," Sodium said. "Buddha called it the realization of the highest truth. It seems odd that despite typical religious intolerance, they deal with the same issues," Hydrogen said, "the same issues the heretical movements explore: humanity's true spiritual nature, its sense of being lost or cast away, its yearning for resurrection, immortality, and union with a divine creator." Similar ideas are present in many ancient sources, such as the Hindu and Avestic scriptures or the Book of the Dead. Ancient traditions influenced later religions that survive in contemporary human society. If the same ideas and hopes inspired many faiths, then why were the so-called heretical faiths so brutally repressed? Why the need to eradicate them? What ideologies did they explore and reveal? What posed such a threat to the religious establishments? Hydrogen asked. "All such heresies had too much in common to be coincidental," Gold said. "We have noticed the similarities in mythical symbolism and tradition shared across great distances," Silicon went on. "Did they learn it from one another? Some of them had no way of communicating. The African and Middle Eastern civilizations lay in relative proximity, but what about the others? Maybe those mysterious maps somebody mentioned belonged to pre-cataclysm ocean-faring civilizations. After the cataclysm, and before the adoption of compass, open sea adventures were risky, so the survivors of the cataclysm likely survived with little probability of prolonged contact. So either all the survivors developed puzzlingly similar mythologies independently, or the myths reflect fading memories of a common pre-cataclysmic experience. Whichever, one thing is certain. Ancient civilizations preserved the legends of their ancestors until institutionalized religions wiped away all traces of such godless paganism. For me, the only remaining question is whether any of the ancient traditions relate to actual historical events. Myth or not, the almost identical traditions are rooted in forgotten pre-cataclysmic eras. The old myths have inspired fables, folk tales, and timeless masterpieces, all derived from even more ancient oral sources. Many refer to animal-symbolized deities with unearthly powers, and all link leonine, serpentine, or bull-horned gods with civilization, wisdom, and knowledge. Many ancient relics show the tree of life between winged goats or bulls, and the tree of knowledge is almost always associated with the serpent, Mercury recalled. Many more, Silicone said, refer to some long-past monumental conflict when victorious warrior gods defeat the old regime of lion, bull/goat, and serpent gods. The victors are often symbolized by birds of prey and associated with obedience and order. The half-man, half-goat gods appear in Europe in the early Hellenic myths. Christianity later portrayed Satan as a horned and bearded man-goat, often accompanied by a serpent and associated with the pentagram, the symbol of Sirius, Silicone continued. Other ancient records report heavenly wars for supremacy over Earth among beings in metallic flying crafts with awesome weapons. Are such myths just mass hallucination? Hydrogen posed a question. What do you guess lies behind all the common spiritual ideas and ancient symbolisms and myths? What are they trying to reveal? Where do they come from? Silicone provided a hypothetical clue. The ancient races revered astronomy and studied the movements of the sun, moon, heavenly bodies, and the star constellations avidly. Why they associated little specks of light in a dark night sky with heavenly bodies is a mystery. 19th-century archaeologists unearthed millennia-old Sumerian clay tablets that depict sophisticated astronomical charts. Some show the solar system's spherical planets within their orbital patterns around the sun. How could they have known all that over 8,000 years ago? They associated natural phenomena with heavenly bodies and symbolized the constellations as animals. Maybe early Ice Age humans associated the powerful natural forces with the awesome cosmos and portrayed them as gods with human characteristics, an attempt to understand the natural forces that affected their survival. Or, Silicone paused. Maybe humans are not alone in the universe. Maybe early civilization did not evolve their spiritual philosophies and sciences but rather inherited them. Could the mythical sacred tablets and pillars, buried before the flood, have been remnants of pre-cataclysmic knowledge? Were those blue-skinned, flying gods in tall helmet crowns just figments of human imagination? Visitors from Sirius is only 8 light-years away from us. Ancient myths refer to the sacred role of star systems, especially Draco, Orion, the Pleiades, and Sirius. If those stars have planets, then maybe their inhabitants discovered Earth long ago. Has human life on Earth evolved naturally without interference? Quite frankly, their disharmony may point to an unnatural evolution. I believe the sun will rise shortly. Time to go find some more answers, Mercury noted. Once again the group prepared for a voyage. Somehow this time the transportal felt different. Could they not have been advanced star systems in nearby constellations? Light lacked its usual brilliant white luminescence, was a rather darkish red, and the force field seemed amplified by a powerful magnetism. Whatever the cause, our heroes went into survival instinct mode. Upon arrival, Sodium vocalized its concern. There is disturbing energy here. We must be careful. They huddled together and looked around. They were in an enclosed arena, a large circular hall with a high domed ceiling. The walls were of solid black masonry, arching upward to a Gothic dome. Gargoyles of birds of prey protruded around the edges of the arched ceiling, their watchful eyes peering down at the floor as if ready to dart and rip an unaware victim apart. The floor was paved with black, gray, and brown pebbles bound by some resin. Returning from an exploration of the masonry walls, Calcium commented. The building is designed to a precise geometric pattern which lets it act as a receiver of energy waves. There were no windows or skylights. Torches spaced along the circular perimeter lit the darkness dimly. They were shaped like fearsome beastly heads. Reddish-yellow flames flicked through holes that highlighted their large, fierce eyes, nostrils, and mouths. Circling the floor of the hall were 300 chairs in 3 rows of 100, set at slightly different levels near the walls. The chairs' black metal and velvet cushions were crowned with vulture-shaped visors on either side of the headrest, which blocked vision to the side and created a solitary presence. The center of the backrest cushions featured a large red embroidered 5. The hall was devoid of other notable features. Lead pointed to a small cylinder on a pedestal to the side of the center of the room. It was a smooth, seamless, thick plate of lead. Lead decided to check it out, and Iron went along. On the other side of the hall was a large box-like object covered with a thick black drape of a sturdy material, embroidered in unfamiliar patterns depicting hieroglyphic symbols. As they stared at the odd patterns on the drape, a voice prompted them from inside the metallic threads. "You sure don't look like any council members or initiates." "No, we're just time travelers passing through," Helium answered. "There are awesome powers here, but likely not what you are after. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Titanium." Before the group could respond, Lead and Iron returned with yet another new companion, a glowing giant. "Please forgive my intrusion and intimidating appearance. I am Uranium. I've been imprisoned inside that canister so long I can't even remember when my half-life began. Your friend was kind enough to end my solitude by talking the rest of its type into letting me slip through. I am so relieved. We're glad to meet you both. We need all the guidance and information we can get. We see this is an important place. What are you doing here?" Silicon asked Uranium politely. "I'm not sure. We were dug out of the earth some time ago, purified, concentrated, and stuck in that canister. We couldn't see outside it and had no idea where they were carrying us. We heard they would manipulate our intense state of existence, and that's all I know. I have had a bad unstable feeling about the whole thing." "You're right to feel that way," Titanium said. "I've been assigned to sit over this holy of unholies for some time." "What on earth is that?" Oxygen wanted to know. "Not quite of this earth," came the reply. "We're not sure where it's from. Centuries ago, when it was brought here, I was made part of its woven fabric cover." "What does it do?" Nitrogen asked. "All I know is that they call it the Ark. It is a communication device between a voice and the council. They call the voice Lord or Amon." "Where does it come from?" Silicon asked. "I'm not sure, but none of us likes it. Once a year when the cosmic alignments are just right, the Ark works, and when it does an immense power fills this place. And it happens tonight." "What does the council deal with?" "Decisions, policies, strategies, things like that. They discuss the past, the present, and the future, not only for humans but also all of us terrestrials. Occasionally, they retire a member and initiate a new one. Sometimes, they meet without the Ark. I can tell you that these 300 men are movers and shakers in the human world system. They hold powerful positions in major academic, financial, control everything. They believe to be servants of a cause, the grand design for Earth and humanity. Their initiations involve complex rituals and oaths of allegiance, obedience, and secrecy. They consider only extraordinary candidates, those who have risen through the social ranks to a certain echelon of worldly importance. Once recruited and initiated, they're in for life. If they break the codes of conduct, they are ritually executed. I have witnessed a few executions. I have seen the Ark levitate a victim in mid-air, torture him, crush every bone, burn them or bleed them through every orifice until death. One of the Lord's favorites is to political, economic, scientific, and media organizations. They decapitate the victim and deflesh the skull and its display on a stake as a trophy. Another familiar symbol, gold noted. Evidently this Ark channels powerful energies from a distance, Silicon surmised, and is configured to some astronomical orientation. I have heard the caretakers refer to a great eye or the bird of order, Titanium said. Have you ever heard anyone mention the nature of the Lord or the voice? Mercury asked. No. But I know that its real name is a mathematical algorithm that can neither be said aloud, nor even known. It is sacred and secret. I believe an ancient tablet with that information is hidden away. Only very few know where. We heard on our last journey, Oxygen said, that ancient wisdom symbolized creation and goodness as light or the sun. Darkness is the absence of light, right? It's sure dark here. Invisibly so, Titanium said, because nobody outside knows what happens here, although the decisions made here affect everything, even us. Please explain. I have heard economic reports that emphasize the planet's true wealth of this planet. They mean minerals. Apparently we are the planet's real treasures. Do you mean that the Lord wants to harvest Earth's minerals? That would clarify a lot this planet's unfortunate history, wouldn't it? Silicone concluded. At that moment our friends heard a faint noise like the chatter of a whispering tuxedo-clad audience, awaiting the arrival of an orchestra. The sound neared until they heard a heavy metallic door turn, screeching on its hinges. Through the doorway they saw the silhouettes of a large group of men dressed in black robes, gloves, leather masks, and tall, cone-shaped hats. They entered the hall in silence and marched to the seats. As they arranged themselves, the friends observed that each had a red embroidered 5 on his robe and a small white skull on his headdress. They stood by their chairs, awaiting something. At the last entered a tall, thin man, obviously the leader. He held a mechanical device in his hand. Making a 360-degree slow turn, he glanced at the assembly, and they bowed under the weight of his gaze. He spoke in a deep voice. "Brothers, we await the moment. It will be soon now." The man nodded to 4 assistants who approached the ark silently, lifted it with some effort, and carried it to the center of the hall, a spot marked with a symbol 2 red keys in a crossed layout like a large 5. They set the ark down gently and, as if handling a precious object, removed the drape to reveal a shiny metal box covered with engravings not unlike the design on the drape. It stood on an exotic wooden pedestal. Atop the ark on either side were 2 winged humanoids, each with one wing pointed down, the other stretched toward the center of the box. They had human bodies, and one had the head of a fierce beast, the other of a bird of prey. Between the tips of their upward stretching wings was a clear red spherical crystal. From each side of the box protruded large plagues depicting a large red 5 rising out of flames. The upper slanted lines of the 5 sign feathered out like wings, while the lower lines ended in claws. One claw held a saber and the other, a human skull. Above the 5 just where the 2 lines crossed was a single eye. Quite inhuman, it gazed with a cold, probing expression. "Tin, copper, and silver," said, "the eye of Ammon." Silicone whispered. "An oracle." The leader put the mechanical device in a pocket in his robe, then lowered his head and slowly raised both arms. Suddenly the crystal began to glow red, until it lit the entire chamber. Our friends heard a humming noise of increasing amplitude and pitch, until even the building began to shake. The sound lasted a while, and then suddenly ended. A sphere of red plasma now hovered in mid-air over the ark. All the council bowed and looked down in respect, fear, and obedience. "Praised be our Lord," prompted the motionless leader. The rest of the assembly cried, "Ammon." After a brief silence, an unearthly, piercing voice resonated from inside the red plasma. A voice our friends would never forget addressed the council. "Greetings, our select ones." All stood quiet and absolutely still. "We convene in this year," the voice said, "marking a special period in Earth's evolution. The world, our creation, undergoes significant transformations. Humanity is about to embark on a new adventure that will elevate its development. As the end of the Second World War approaches, new beginnings await you. New tasks and challenges face you, counselors. Tonight, we will discuss new policies that will guide the next millennium of your history. Before that, however, I want to review the relevant facts, events, and policies of the past 13 millennia since we embraced your existence and gave you civilization. You may be seated now." Everyone sat and stared at the red plasma. The voice resumed. "As you know, we undertook to guard your world 13 millennia ago when your ancestors were little more than beasts. They ravished the earth, stained it with their refuse, practiced cannibalism, lived in filthy earthen holes, and had no civilization worthy of mention. That is absolutely not true. Carbon cried angrily. Silicone signaled him to be quiet. They sat idly and stupidly until it was time to eat again. They hunted anything that moved with stone weapons. If they found no animals, a lost or captured member of a neighboring clan would do. They lived in filth and disease and died young. Despite their hardships, they bred day and night like biological reproduction units. At night, they huddled in holes, afraid of man-eating animals, the wind, or darkness. Such were your ancestors when we decided to become their guardians, or gods. Of course, the forces of evil were also around, leading humanity astray, corrupting them with evil teachings. Still, the forces of good and order overcame, and we took the primitive human race under our protective wings. Our angels came to earth to condition humanity and erase the effects of evil. That was the beginning of humanity's road to salvation, which will someday raise it to the heavens. Unfortunately, evil was rooted deeper than we thought. Some humans went on practicing and worshipping evil ways, and thought of themselves as demigods. It became evident that their sinful memories had to be erased, once and for all, by conclusive means. The slate had to be wiped clean of corruption. About 12.5 millennia ago the flood annihilated those sinners. The select ones of that time were advised to save themselves and their families any way they could. After that, the planet changed dramatically. The irreversible loss of flora and fauna necessitated the introduction of raised food as opposed to hunted or gathered. Our angels devised appropriate genetically altered crops, bred domesticated animals, and taught humanity to grow cultivated food. Gradually humans settled into farming communities. We gave them further technologies: mathematics, fired clay, writing, games and music. They learned to extract metals from ore and manipulated their environment in previously unimaginable ways. With sturdier tools, they cleared forests, diverted rivers, carved mountains, built roads, and dominated or conquered their neighbors. Large-scale organized warfare was born. No development was accidental. Humanity needs constant hardship and anxiety to evolve. A pack of distorted lies so far, Carbon muttered. I knew a different world at least 4 millennia before these guys showed up to make themselves gods and angels. Humanity's additional powers necessitated laws, the voice continued. To that end, we set up a ruling noble class. To sate their hunger for spiritual answers and to deflect the old evil teachings, we taught new doctrines of religion and priesthood. The new religions assured that humans first and foremost recognized their true God and no other. Efficient religious machinery was indispensable for maintaining social order in a world that faced the re-emergence of evil. We realized that if all humans spoke the same tongue or talked about the same ideas, they could not challenge each other, compete, and grow. They would also be hard to control as their numbers grew and they became increasingly organized. Different languages and different versions of the same religious teachings prevented idleness and stagnation. As long as they all recognized the only true God, was all well? Absolutely not. You must understand man's real nature. Humans are still animals. By nature, they cheat, lie, kill, steal, envy, hate, and destroy. Man is incapable of disciplined cooperation, much less compassion. Instead of working together, they connive to destroy one another. Instead of striving for the common good, they are jealous. The strong kill or exploit the weak and all other species, mercilessly and without hesitation. They obey and understand only one thing: law and order. Earth has always been a planet of juvenile delinquents. To rehabilitate them, we have turned it into a planet of labor and work. There is no other way to evolve humanity to an acceptable civilized state. Our bemused friends resented the slander of their home planet. In the millennia following the flood, planetary conditions stabilized. Food production increased in most places. Arid places without food or water persisted, so their inhabitants produced tradable goods. Soon enough they began to raid for loot, and everyone began invading or defending like a bunch of armed wild animals. Barbaric anarchy was widespread as they learned about long-distance travel, transportation, and organized warfare. Only a new order could stop the waste of productive labor resources. We set up regional ruling empires with standing armies, rigid rules, order, and stability. Successive empires ensured orderly progress. Religion and military force are effective evolutionary necessities. The regional imperial model worked well for a while, but rapidly rising world population and unequal distribution of wealth created socio-economic unrest. Brute force needed an underlying religious foundation, so an era of holy empires and holy wars replaced the past, and civilized nations assumed the moral right to rule the barbarians. Discriminatory faith replaced comparative civilization. Supranational religious institutions formed or cooperated with the ruling classes. For centuries the religious kingdom social system worked well, though when the world's population surged uncontrollably, we provided new technologies to improve living conditions, technologies that increased economic activity through power-based mechanization, such as systems, merchant economic systems. Reduced the old aristocrats' idly generated incomes, a transfer of wealth and power that caused revolutions, wars, and upheavals. As always, our elite were in key positions to guide the transformation of the industrializing societies along the planned path. Capital was the key lubricant in the machinery of change. During the last 350 years, the industrial powers colonized the world's underdeveloped regions. The world's rich nations became lazy, arrogant, and demanding. New socio-political ideologies evolved. Calls for human rights emerged. Inevitably, sacrilege crept up the social ranks, affecting our undesirably. We needed new and more socio-economic orders. Materialistic orders that work with different models of planning and control, fascism, communism, and capitalism were among the options that could contain an increasingly populated and sophisticated world. They sedate their citizens with promises of freedom, equality, and prosperity, and hence secure their obedience. Of course we supported them with effective propaganda and a dominant military-industrial establishment. To transform the world from colonialism to a capitalist communist fascist order we needed a couple of worldwide wars. Two wars that crushed and restructured the old world, so that no means of production could be rejuvenated without capital, our money. Camouflaged as aid, we achieved collateralized control of all productive resources. World War I stripped Europe of its colonial steam-powered and hydrocarbon-fueled and industrial classes. The revolution that created new bourgeoisie engaged in activities unlike the initially landless, the feudal agricultural bourgeoisie swiftly. Designs complex privileges, bankrupted Tsarist Russia, and transformed it under the communist model. Germany opted for fascism, and the ensuing Second World War destroyed and crushed industrial Europe, Japan, and China. That was the real purpose behind those two utterly destructive wars, to topple the old regime and reshape the future world. Tonight we note that humanity has harnessed the powers of the atom and will use it against Japan, not only to end of the war, but also to serve as a warning to future humanity. All our friends turned sympathetically to uranium, no longer so radiant. Before I take up our future strategies and policies, I need to remind you of the directives given to the Council on May 1, 1776. They outlined our policies for the Industrial Revolution. They called your attention to capital and the mass media, as well as other evolving fields. In the modern world, knowledge, energy sources, communication channels, and new military and civil technologies play crucial roles in daily events. We need new doctrines and strategies to implement the new world order. First, human nature is more bad than good, so the best government is by force and terror, not by academic discussions. Every human aims for power, and rare are those unwilling to sacrifice the common good to secure their own. What has restrained humanity historically? First brute force, then law, which is force disguised behind arbitrary guidelines. Second, right is might. Our power must remain invisible. The end justifies the means. Third, a human mob is blind, senseless, slack, unstable, unruly, and neither understands nor respects even its own welfare. Left to themselves, people come to ruin from dissensions over selfish interests and power. Without strong authority, the masses sink into chaos. Guiding despotism leads to civilizing discipline. Fourth, freedom and equality are only notions. There is no equality in nature. Nature produces inequality of minds, otherwise prioritizes characters and capacities and natural laws. Human law must follow the same logic but less visibly. Our method is force and make-believe, force in political affairs, concealed in diplomacy. Deceit, treachery, and bribery are our method of government. Fifth, we engage the human animal spirit with its material desire, selfishness, and greed. An institutionally educated class, headed by the money aristocracy, will replace the rule of so-called moral men. Sixth, the masses may elect servile leaders. But, these leaders shall know little about government and turn it over to our army of advisors and specialists, bred and trained to rule world affairs. Whereas, constrained education must be utilized to maintain nominal mass literacy. Seventh, humanity needs wars. Besides facilitating our economic agenda, they neutralize humanity's excess energy and wealth. They arouse humanity's deepest and darkest animal instincts. Eighth, the press moves people's thinking and can lay the groundwork for our agenda. We exert influence from the shadows. The media's purpose is not to inform, but to form public opinion. Ninth, poverty is our ally. Only poverty turns humans into virtual slaves, which is their only practical historic state. Humans are not poor because the rich and the privileged exploit them, but because poverty has always maintained order and control over the planet. 10th, our goal is regardless of freedom or obedience and servitude. Cyclical economic shocks will global human bondage, equality, and based on engender disenchantment and brutishness and foster an aversion to morality and spirituality. Material gain will become cult of selfish materialism without spiritual compassion. 11th, economic and financial monopolies we control will amass colossal international bodies pretending hunger and despair. We are humanity's saviors from chaos. People must come to believe that only a one-world government can save them and must knowingly and willingly submit to it. 12th, military and police power are essential to fight wars or threats. We need insecurity, terrorism, and war. We must create and control both terrorists and the international agencies that confront them. 13th, our operatives must excel in commerce, science, administration, law, economics, and the media. We will groom and select people for key leadership positions. But, they shall always have weaknesses, like shady habits or inconvenient secrets, so we can ensure their loyalty. We will have agents everywhere to control all governing and administrative bodies. 14th, we define freedom as the right to do only what our laws allow. Humans must never have freedom. They are incapable of it. Judging and administering the law must rest in our hands. 15th, we will not allow spiritual beliefs or religions other than the ones we promote. 16th, we will control assemblies, clubs, and societies of all sorts so they can spread their tentacles into all aspects of society. 17th and finally, obedience and secrecy are essential and uncompromising. You must punish anyone who breaches our established order. Exemplary punishment of evil is a duty. Wealth, overseeing to overcome war. After the war we will control most of the fascist, capitalist and communist nations, their colonies, their economic production, financial wealth, military-industrial establishment, technological institutions and firms, research academia, media organizations, and energy companies. All future members of human society will be simple cogs and wheels of the giant production machinery of this planet, just as they have always been. For most of their lives, humanity must work, or be consumed by their bread-earning endeavors. Their life, identity, and ego shall be defined by their work, and consumed by what they own and owe. For a small sheltered piece of their own beloved planet's free surface, they will have to pay an exorbitant amount of money and interest as compared to what we will pay them for their labor. Humans shall labor for 30 of their lives' most productive years just to pay back the capital, borrowed to procure their earthen dwellings. Thus, they will freely slave away, consume, and borrow. Yes, they have freedoms, but only to choose their field of slavery. The basic patterns of their lives, what they eat, wear, listen to, watch, their fashions, infatuations, political opinions, idols and celebrities, or recreational choices will all be determined and owned by us. We create, and control this matrix of delusional freedom. We shall control all of them, even their political puppet show stooges. They can vote or object all they wish. Yet we hold the economic and political strings. As for their work, our academic curriculums train narrow-minded, single-field specialists, who believe higher education has made them smart. For the uneducated, we offer the old recipe of sex, sports, alcohol, and other sedatives. We will also create, groom, and control their enemies. Humans need enemies, and they provide an excuse to quell dissent, disguise the real issues, and mobilize the masses. Manipulate humanity's physical desires. Give them rich, famous, and sexy role models. Condition them to believe that material nature is their only real existence. Another potent motivational factor is the ego, the evolved version of animal survival instinct, self-perception, and preservation. The ego promotes self-centeredness and detaches humans from one another. Promote competitive, insecure, jealous egos. Promote unitary egoism, and destroy compassionate harmony. Egocentrism, consumerism, and materialism shall be the religion of the future. For as long as humans are ignorant of their true identity, and connection with the universe, they will remain lost, disillusioned, and manipulated creatures. A laboring human mind, whose virtual world is filled with energy-consuming, incomprehensible hodgepodge of misinformation, will never be able to rest or think straight, let alone progress. Another major issue the world will face is environmental change. As I told you before, the post-flood world underwent significant climatic changes that still continue and will accelerate with the increasing consumption and pollution. The post-ice age climatic changes are still going on. As ice and forest cover diminish, the world will get dirtier, drier, and hotter. The warm, fertile regions that nurtured Ice Age civilizations are still heating and drying at worrisome rates. People will soon suffer severe droughts or run out of drinking water. From that will come food shortages, more pests, insects, and disease. The oceans will rise and inundate the low-lying coastal zones. Future wars will be for drinkable water. Counselors, I do not have to tell you the outcome of all that in a world of over 10 billion destitute humans. Extensive police powers and military control networks will be needed to protect people from themselves and from natural calamities. To justify all that, we must stay involved in developing threats, especially terrorist networks. Our operatives will finance and arm religious fanatics to be our pawns. How else can we justify global militarization, spying, and police control? There is no other effective control for the potentially uncontrollable near future, where otherwise there will be severe global chaos, wars, and genocide. Counselors, the new order must come to power everywhere in the first 2 decades of the next century. Nation-states will become regional cultural and administrative units of a supranational world government. That is our long-term strategic objective. First, we will dominate all national governments, and then organize a few large global trade blocs according to commercial and geographical criteria. National governments must willingly give up control of legislative, commercial, and social policy matters. Governing bodies must become continental rather than national. National politics must be trivialized. By then economic production will have long been global. Later the superstates will merge into various international bodies. Then, All those groups will converge as a global government e pluribus unum, one out of many. Fake referenda and the usual democratic sideshows will provide cover, but no matter how much we try, people will not give up their rights and freedoms easily. We need such disorder and chaos that people will welcome a world savior with open arms. And that savior will be a strong militaristic world government that brings order out of chaos. In the meantime, continue to mislead and confuse, and be sure people believe everything comes from the God they imagine. Counselors, the final, crucial, and potentially threatening variable is timing. We do not have a lot of it. Over the next century galactic alignments will turn against our favor. Evil still lurks out there. As ever, it stands to wreak havoc in this world. We must be diligent in our determination, and the rapid execution of the stated strategic policies. With this, I will now leave you. Then the red plasma field disappeared, leaving the assembly in an eerie silence. The counselors rose, joined hands, and like zombies began singing a hymn. Deviant from others' solemn silence, Hydrogen objected, how can humanity ever progress, if their minds, lives, and their freedom to think and choose is so strictly controlled? Friends, Mercury whispered, though we cannot see the sky, I know dawn is near. We must prepare for departure. As the brilliant white flash returned, our friends could only think how good it felt to escape that hellish den of the almost invisible darkness. The vessel of life and light. Tell me what is being done on earth that the earth is so afflicted and shaken. Noah in the Hebrew book of Enoch. They say that if the flood, which occurred in the time of Deucalion, Greek Noah figure, destroyed most living things, the inhabitants of southern Egypt survived more than any others. 1st century BC Greek historian Diodorus Siculus. What ferry boat shall be brought to you? Bring me it flies and alights. The earth speaks, the gate of the earth God is open, the doors of Geb are open to you. May you remove yourself to the sky upon your iron throne. Excerpts from the pyramid texts of Saqqara, Egypt. And that their inventions, knowledge of heavenly bodies, might not be lost, upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed at one time by the force of fire, and at another time by the violence and quantity of water, they made 2 pillars, one of brick, the other of stone. They inscribed their discoveries upon them both, that in case the pillar of brick should be destroyed by the flood, the pillar of stone might remain and exhibit these discoveries to mankind, and also inform them that there was another pillar of brick erected by them. 1st century Jewish historian Josephus writing about the antediluvian world's inhabitants. Stele in the land of Syria. Inscribed in the sacred tongue in hieroglyphic letters by Thoth, the first Hermes, and translated after the flood from the sacred tongue into the Greek language. Contained in the letter of the monks Enceladus to Ptolemy. The sun gods went behind the rock gates of heaven. Ancient Japanese manuscript. That dark night, fiercely marching clouds obscured the moon and the stars, trampling across the sky like black-clad warriors. Gold broke the group's traumatized silence. It is rather curious. Unlike other earthlings that coexist in harmony, humanity is in a state of imbalance and chaos. Certain things about them are insensible, like overpopulation, insatiable consumption, or destructive interactions with nature. Oxygen added. What troubles humans? Buddha always said that it is only hardship, poverty, despair, and material struggle that transforms people into monsters, Sodium replied. Humans are generally self-centered. They seem unaware of their true purpose in life, to find their path to the source. Silicone answered. Indeed, humans are a successful, dominant, but disharmonious species. They abuse power, whether wielding a stick, sword, or atomic power. But beauty is embedded in human souls. Young children are angelic. Maybe, surviving their desperate adult lives transforms them. I agree. All humans instinctively recognize and respect goodness. Sulfur summed it nicely. As if a reflection of the divine fire resides in the depths of their consciousness. Titanium had been quietly dealing with a lingering issue. What future galactic alignment was the voice talking about? Soon, the transportal whisked the group away. When they arrived, Helium exclaimed, "Great! We love mountains and lakes." Indeed, lushly forested highlands and a clear blue lake snaking out of view behind a distant mountain peak delighted their eyes. The lake's long, narrow shape identified it as a melting glacier's endpoint, now teeming with marine life. Countless birds hovered above, repeatedly diving into the cold, clear water. Not too far from our friends, children swam and played near the shore. Narrow plumes of white smoke in the distance and the faint sound of mothers calling their children presaged a human settlement nearby. Old evergreen forests covered the mountainsides and the lakeside plain. Other species of younger vegetation hinted at a slowly warming climate, which did not escape our friends' attention as they tried to figure out their whereabouts. I see several kinds of birds and vegetation I remember seeing only in the pre-flood library records, Silicone said. Some are extinct in our era. Friends, I believe we may be in a pre-flood epoch. How do you figure? Mercury asked. Most of the flora and fauna here once existed in large numbers, according to the records at the library, but the flood washed them away. Since then, most of them have been extinct. That's why I believe we've been delivered to that age. Who built your library? The gods. I have never known. Just then nitrogen returned from its usual aerial canvas and directed everyone's attention to the near distance. There's an assembly of some kind. The group saw a fairly large group of old men and women walking up a hill and headed for them. Within minutes, they reached the lakeside plateau where the crowd was gathering. From there they saw that the snake-like lake stretched all the way behind the mountains. The distant plumes of smoke now looked like dancing white serpents children had left. Turning the lake a deep purple that reminded them of their night at Bozergmer's lakeside villa. Most of the old people wore simple white robes, though some wore colorful capes, hats, or ornaments. They were all quite old and gray. They walked calmly, contentedly, steadily, albeit most used canes. Our friends noticed a glow of peace and tranquility in their eyes. The humans of their era were not so serene. One by one the elders reached the hill, greeted one another, and embraced joyfully. Many others approached. How can any one village have so many grannies? Helium wondered. I doubt they're all from the same village, Oxygen said. The way they greet shows they haven't seen each other for a while. Perhaps, many are from neighboring regions. They must be here for some important event. Look at them. Indeed, hundreds of old men and women were scrambling up the hill, some helping the others. Then Iron spotted a shrine formed by a cavity dug into a large boulder. Many dozens of candles and clay oil lamps burned beside the shrine, some shaped like serpents or with serpents and dragons engraved on them. Inside the cavity was a crumpled metallic object. What on earth is that? Iron asked. It must be an alien, Phosphorus guessed. A voice from inside the object answered. True, we are very rare in this world but not alien to it. I am Krypton. My. I've heard of your kind, but I never thought I would have the pleasure. Please, the pleasure is mine. I just sit here idly rising to the heavens. The sun was below the horizon, to be adored as a sacred object, but you all sound so worldly. Why have these old folks put you in this shrine? As best I remember, we were part of a flying craft. I recall being cast down at some point, after an explosion. Then these people's ancestors found us and brought us here. They still look after us. A Vimana. Chlorine ventured. What's going on here tonight? Is this a regular event? Who are these people? Silicone fired 3 questions. I've seen most of them before. They come here regularly to make offerings and sing hymns to their benevolent gods. Sometimes they gather here for talks, celebrations, and so on. I believe they're from the nearby villages and towns, but they rarely gather here all at once. There must be a special event I'm not aware of. That one over there is the high priestess of the nearby village. She's the official caretaker of this shrine. They looked at the high priestess. She was a tall woman with long, snow-white hair, and bronzed skin. She wore a flowing white robe and sandals. Her eyes glowed intensely from her wrinkled face, a kind of grandmotherly expression ingrained in most children's memory. She held a wooden staff shaped like the head of a snake. An embroidered blue plus adorned her robe. Our friends saw that as a good omen. People approached her with seemingly important inquiries that she answered. Our friends saw that everyone who talked with her wore an expression of joy and astonishment. After they talked to her, they engaged each other in intense discussions. The group briefed Krypton about their journeys and inquired about their surroundings. This place is a highland paradise. Where are we, and in what era? I know that we are in the only significant highlands in northeastern Africa. As for the time, I guess that's relative to your point of reference. I do know that people here tell of a great cataclysm that shook the earth and the heavens a few millennia ago. Krypton replied. We must be in the mountains of the Horn of Africa, the land that will be known as Abyssinia or Ethiopia. A land of proud, independent people who have many ancient traditions and myths. Silicone added. But Ethiopia is arid. This is subtropical landscape. Mercury objected. Remember, Silicone cautioned, we may be here during the time when millions of cubic miles of ice was thawing in the geological equivalent of the twinkling of an eye. The atmospheric moisture caused coastal floods, formed large lakes and great flowing rivers, and brought on torrential rains. The face of our world was transformed for millennia. Ancient records refer to a much greener North and Northeast Africa, Middle East, and other places like coastal Peru. Arid now, they were once home to early post-cataclysm recovering civilizations. Agriculture was an absolute necessity after the loss of the flora and fauna that fed earlier hunter-gatherers of the Ice Age. The African Sahara is a very young desert. Studies show it was a green savanna up to around 9000 BC. From about 14,000 BC it rained here plenty. The climate was cooler, cloudier, and wetter, which may explain the evidence of water erosion around the North African landscape. The climate changed after the global flooding of around 10,500 BC. Sand slowly buried ancient Egypt, but her people cherished the memory of bygone eras when the gods were in their midst. Silver, does that explain the evidence of extensive water erosion at the monuments of Giza? Silicone, it is claimed that these monuments are a little over 4 millennia old. But, between 4 to 3 millennia before our era, during the time of 19th dynasty pharaohs, both the valley temple's severely eroded stone walls and the Sphinx's body were refaced with new masonry. They indisputably recorded such renovations on stone tablets placed nearby. So, if 4,000 years ago these monuments were already severely eroded to require renovations, then it is safe to assume that they must be much older. The Sphinx's head was never refaced with new masonry, and unlike its lower body it does not show any sign of serious erosion. You can still see traces of its headdress's red and white stripe colorings. I wonder if it was just resculpted, and what kind of a face it may have originally possessed. Do these monuments hold secrets of a bygone epoch? I suspect that you folks may be right, Krypton said. The people here talk of gods roaming about. I will come back to that, but first, I want to ask Silicone about a strange story I heard from a couple of pilgrims. They described a land far to the north which suddenly became a frozen abyss where the sun and the stars came out for only one long day in the whole year. Silicone recounted the story of the pole shift and its effect on Siberia, the ancient area of Asia. He finished by saying, it was an era of traumatic events. Countless ancient myths recall the survivors' struggles and of mysterious civilizing gods who descended from the heavens to help them. The sky had now turned dark, and only the hilltop bonfires and the crescent moon lit the surroundings. Everyone was eagerly anticipating something, though our friends did not know what. Hydrogen addressed their new friend. You said these people speak of gods who roam the earth. Tell us more. Consider that, Krypton replied, these people's ancestors commonly used the word God to mean any stupendous natural entity or event. They called the star constellations, sun, moon, and the heavenly bodies gods. Also powerful natural forces like lightning, the seas, storms, earthquakes were adored. So, were there really gods who guided and taught them civilization? Are they just mere fantasies about cosmic phenomena? I don't quite know how to answer you. As I said before, I was part of a fantastically fast flying craft, until the accident brought me to this rocky crevice. I have seen superb flying crafts in the northern skies now and again. I'm as amazed as the people here, who drop to their knees and put their hands together to show respect for the winged gods, as they call them. They are supposed to come from north of here in the land of the mighty river. The elders never fail to remind their young ones that those gods saved life after the catastrophes. They say they came right after the calamity and taught the survivors to build shelters and settlements, make tools, use fire, grow food, and breed animals. They taught them about weather and the seasons. They are still in contact with humankind's great leaders. Their contact here is the high priestess. Have you heard of any Egyptian gods called Ra, Osiris, Horus, Isis, or Thoth? Copper asked. They speak a different language and name their godlike characters differently. All I know is what the people say or sing as prayer hymns. There is a gap between the godlike beings and what they see, hear, understand, and believe. They don't understand the gods' technologies, so what they say needs to be deciphered. There are strange stories about the first god kings guarding the earth after the calamity and helping regenerate life. They were superhuman. They had great mental, physical, and psychic powers. They manipulated objects magically and had unfamiliar acoustic powers, what the people call the word or the unspoken language. They apparently live much longer than humans. They are taller than humans. Their faces shine, their eyes are bright, their skin is a shiny blue. They wear strange clothing and large helmets that generate magical powers. Our friends looked at each other. Sounded familiar. They have known of their gods for a long time. A group of them has lived alongside the surviving humans since the last major cataclysm. People believe they come from the land of the mighty river to the north. The Nile, Silicone explained needlessly. They monitor the world, assisting, organizing, and re-educating the survivors, who sing hymns of gratitude before meals or sleep, or at shrines like this. They never force anything but rather promote mutual cooperation. Their assemblies feature consciousness-elevating music. People say they have altered plants and animals in their scientific centers to adapt them to domestication. One created regional learning centers where he teaches select elders writing, sciences, building arts, and the study of the true nature of existence. They say he understands everything and imparts knowledge and wisdom to the worthy for future safekeeping. They tell their children he is out when the moon is a crescent shaped like tonight and may visit them in their sleep, bearing gifts. The crescent moon is his insignia. Thoth. Copper cried. Are these gods associated with serpent/dragon symbolism? Oxygen asked. Indeed, Krypton said, one symbol for them is a serpent/dragon creature. They symbolize the god I mentioned with two serpents coiled around a winged staff, a symbol from their heavenly world. Their hymns speak of their gods' technologies. One about the journey of people who die goes this way: the gods who are in the sky are brought to you. The gods who are on earth assemble for you. They place their hands under you. They make a ladder for you that you may ascend on it to the sky. The doors of the sky are thrown open to you. The doors of the starry firmament are thrown open for you. We've heard of the ladder before, Mercury said. Others may explain my origin, Krypton said. The king is a flame, moving before the wind to the sky and to the end of the earth. The king travels the air and traverses the earth. There is brought to him a way of ascent to the sky. The earth speaks. The gate of the earth god is open. The doors of heaven are opened for you. May you remove yourself to the sky upon your Bja throne. What Bja? In ancient Egyptian it meant the metal of heaven or divine metal. The Egyptians used it later to mean iron, once they discovered it. Silicone explained. Our friends watched the elders chatting, or gazed at the scenery. Like a heavenly mirror, the calm lake seemed a perfect backdrop, reflecting the crescent moon and the stars. The high priestess and a few elders assembled on a rocky crag overlooking the lake and talked intensely as they watched the sky above the lake eagerly. Something important was in the air. A sudden commotion interrupted their pensive silence, and everyone stood suddenly, turning excited eyes to the northern skies. Some put their hands together and began praying and rejoicing. The high priestess raised and extended her arms and began to sing a hymn. I think I see a light moving too fast to be a star, Titanium said. It's a flying craft. I sense its force field, Krypton added. Our friends were excited at the prospect of seeing a Vimana. Would they also meet the mythical savior, the dying gods of antiquity? They began to share the people's jubilation. The moving light grew brighter, crossing the night sky rapidly at a low altitude. Finally it descended slowly, maneuvering flawlessly toward the northern end of the dark lake. They saw its bright contour and flashing blue and white lights. Its flat, round body was a symmetrical airfoil that sliced through the air in a gliding motion, all the while generating an intense radiant light. Then while still at some distance, the craft suddenly stopped and hovered about 20 feet above the surface of the lake. It turned and approached the onlookers. Our friends saw a shining base rotating about a central axis, and heard only a quiet hissing. A flying gyroscope, Silicone suggested. What powers it? Uranium wondered aloud. The flashing strobe lights went off, and the craft dimmed. A humanoid entity emerged from a hatch at the top and stood motionless as his tall, slim body rose above the craft on a shining circular platform floating in mid-air. The metallic platform consisted of two round plates, separated by a luminescent energy field. The elders knelt in respect. The entity wore a shining white cape over a tight silver blue suit. On his upper left chest an insignia caught our friend's attention, a plus sign inside a circle. He held a golden staff, its handle a reared dragon with serene, half-closed eyes. He wore a large metal headgear, a half-elliptical canister on top of which rested a deep blue around the reaching a zenith and supporting protruding clear flat panels on either side. As the god approached they saw it was over 7 feet tall without any body hair, an elongated face, and shining skin that glowed like the moon. His elongated eyes were larger than most humans, their deep blue shining like sapphires. His skin color tone was slightly blue-hued like a cloud-covered shallow tropical sea. Judging from his complexion and eyes, I think he is from some place without much light. Perhaps that is why he has come at night, Silicone commented. The metallic platform stopped and lowered to a small cleared area covered with wild flowers. The elders were silent and motionless. The god's helmet began to emit a dim blue light, and after a moment the god began to address the crowd in a language Krypton understood. Our friends were amazed that neither the god's mouth, nor lips moved. His audible telepathic words came from somewhere in his helmet. My children, my friends, be at rest. The high priestess remained standing, her hands together. She looked down as she addressed the visitor. Your Highness, my lord. We are overjoyed to be in spherical crystal the size of a walnut. Canister coiled two metallic serpents, your presence. We have eagerly awaited this moment since you sent word of your coming. I have done as you asked and gathered your disciples this night. The entity, whom the priestess called guardian, nodded gratefully when she set an exquisitely enameled blue terracotta jug containing liquid on a platform. His body, as well as his helmet, increased in brightness. A woman among the onlookers asked the guardian why he had come to them. We come from a world not unlike yours. It has a star and moons. It is far from here. Not many of my kind can visit your beautiful world as frequently as they wish. That is why some of us stay here among you. The woman asked, Guardian, where is your world? The guardian looked at the sky and pointed upward. There. That is where my people live. He's pointing to the direction of Orion and the star Sirius, right? Mercury murmured. Silicone nodded. Yes. They are in the same part of the sky. Many ancient civilizations revered them. But which one is the guardian star system? We have much water there, the guardian said. That is why we love water and are at home in it. But our planet gets less starlight. Your sun is too intense for us, so we are creatures of the night here. We have been visiting your world for thousands of Earth years. We have older memories of this world than you do. Earth is your home, but we also feel at home here. We believe in living harmoniously with all the cosmos. For as long as we have been here, we have played an important role in your planet's well-being. Why did we come? There are many intelligent life forms in our universe, all at different levels of development. Fundamentally, all life forms share one thought, the search for the nature of existence and all the queries that naturally arise from that field of inquiry. All beings are, however, bound in some degree to a material dimension of the universe. Everywhere in the universe, living beings experience consciousness. They feel and are aware of themselves and their existence. They know fatigue, hunger, happiness, affection, or sadness. The physical body is a shell with needs, and limitations in strength, ability, and presence in time and space. The body is a vehicle for the spirit, a material shell that extracts energy and minerals from its surroundings to survive and be comfortable. Yet that is not our true essence. Our bodies host our spirits, which are formless and immaterial. The guardian detected confusion among his audience, and changed his tack. Let me tell you why we came in the first place. All star systems and planets are configured differently. Planets vary in size and mineral composition and abundance. Advanced entities travel beyond their own worlds to explore others. We value your world's minerals. Since a very long time ago, before your ancestors existed, we have visited your planet. They found various subspecies of primitive humanoids, living simply. They avoided us strange visitors. Then, despite our policy of non-interference, something happened. Around 135,000 Earth years before now, a visiting mission stayed a long time. Forced by the isolation and tempted by curiosity, our visitors befriended a group of Homo sapiens. The transfer of civilizing advantage, humanoid species. After that, your world and ancestors became our moral responsibility. Many millennia passed until that dreaded event 4,500 years ago. The guardian paused, its shining face traumatized. The luminescent halo diminished considerably, surely an indication of love and information gave them a competitive, and over time, they replaced the other compassion. He must be referring to the pole shift, Silicone murmured. My lord, the priestess asked, did other catastrophes befall the world before the last one? Yes, my child. A similar event destroyed almost all life on Earth millions of years ago. Giant marine life, amphibians, and lizards, and intense vegetation filled the oceans and the land. An asteroid collided with Earth. Almost every living thing died in a very short time. Billions of decomposing organisms sunk into layers of the Earth's crust. The bitumen you use as waterproofing or fuel is the remains of their decayed organic mass. The last calamity was milder because the asteroid did not hit Earth directly. The asteroid's gravitational shock wave and its tail of rock, dust, and superheated compressed gas whiplashed the planet. The Earth's magnetic field and crust slipped, causing floods, earthquakes, electromagnetically charged storms, and volcanic eruptions. It wiped out most life on Earth, including our installations. We sent assistance from various places at once. The Sumerian myth of Tiamat whose tail whipped the world. Phosphorus suggested. The guardian continued. I cannot imagine what would have happened to this beautiful world had the asteroid hit it head-on, but the devastation its shockwave caused was bad enough. Unfortunately, due to time-space relations, it took us years to get here. What our rescue teams found filled them with grief and horror. Black smoke from the volcanoes and massive fires darkened the sky for years. Most life was crushed into an organic pulp. Walls of water had swept great swaths of land clean. Only the higher ground escaped the floods. Only remnants challenges confronted of life survived. Formidable us. The survivors were a community of savages, thrown back to the Stone Age. Hardly any trace of civilization remained. When we found them, your ancestors were ignorant. Only rare old survivors recognized us. Others related us to relics like stone figurines, cave paintings, or oral traditions. To them we were the gods who created the world returning from heaven. They rejoiced to see us, which made our job somewhat easier. A quick scan revealed the extent of the job of restoring the world of humanity to advanced civilized life. Most larger animals were extinct. The starving humans had resorted to war, pillage, and cannibalism. Our teams fanned out across the world to find, rescue, and re-civilize the survivors, scattered across the world's scarred face. We restored water and food supplies, sanitary conditions, and re-educated the people. Our scientists produced mutant versions of plant and animal life that could adapt to Earth's new climate. We introduced technologies, life sciences, social laws, and culture at a rapid pace. Most important of all, we reintroduced the study of existence, alchemy. Cults grew up around us, our life-regenerating powers, and civilizing miracles. We became creator gods, roaming the earth doing good deeds. At first we did not mind the characterization, since it made our work easier. But our wiser leaders pointed out the risks of our being misperceived. When societies undergo technological and social changes too quickly, many become disoriented. A civilization needs spiritual maturity to adopt the powers of technology. Otherwise, decadence supersedes enlightenment. The guardian paused. He closed his radiant blue eyes and grew somber. His tall shining body somewhat withered, and visibly dimmed in luminosity. Everyone wondered in anxious anticipation, about what was storming through his superb intellect. I am here tonight to warn you. The melting polar ice masses, moved to warmer latitudes by the calamitous polar shift, have been rapidly thawing. This has brought about instability. The Earth will be changing again. A new catastrophe is upon you, through which many of you will not survive. Everyone froze in disbelief. Only Silicone understood what the Guardian meant. Silicone remembered the event that turned it into a wandering vagabond. Within months, the Guardian said, a massive flood will inundate most of Earth's surface. Only the highest land will be spared. The Guardian paused while his audience digested the news. Some women wept, others comforted them. Many gazed into the distance. Why was the Creator not kinder? What was the purpose of so much misery? It was all hard to understand. The Guardian continued. Melting ice has for millennia been gathering far to the northwest of here behind a frozen earthen dam, creating a giant inland sea at an elevation higher than the oceans. Should the frozen wall fail, the release of water into the world's oceans will be catastrophic. We know it's weakening. We believe it will fail. The only question is when. Our analysis shows that the resulting floods tidal waves will sweep most of Earth's surface. Only the highlands will escape. Even here your life will change. Most life forms will be lost. It will take years of global flooding and rainstorms to eventually redistribute the water around the globe. Silicone commented. It is well documented that only one such lake, Lake Agassiz, at its peak, once occupied an area of 110,000 square miles, covering most of what will be known as Manitoba, Ontario, and Saskatchewan, in Canada, as well as North Dakota and Minnesota, in the United States. It had formed from the melting ice in less than just 1,000 years. It is believed to have eventually drained through the St. Lawrence Seaway, and leaving behind only the 5 Great Lakes. And this was just one such lake. It is also believed that the Hudson Bay, in northeastern Canada, may have originally been a gigantic meltwater lake that due to its immense built-up pressure, broke its earthen barrier and poured its waters into the ocean. The guardian continued. There is no time to waste. You, the elders of your people, must do many things. That is why I have called on you tonight. Other briefings are happening all over the world with the elders of all highland humans. Tell your people to pack for survival. They should take enough to last a few months. Only those strong enough to make it to the higher peaks will survive. You and your families should get to high ground at once. Even these mountains will go underwater. There is no hope for the lowlands people. Take as much food and water as you can. The sea water will ruin everything, so take any grain or other food plants you can. What you save will be your food after the flood. What you don't preserve will probably become extinct. Try to save the animals. Take a pair when you can and food for them. That is your task, my dear friends and disciples. One of the elders, trembling, asked, My Lord, how will our children know when it is all over and safe to descend? They cannot farm in the mountains. The tidal waves will take weeks to subside, the guardian said, but no one should descend for months, because more floods may come. They should not resettle the lowlands for years, since the soil will be either saturated or saline. Where will you be, my lord, during all this? We will leave soon, and most of us will go home. Only a skeleton crew will remain at the orbital station to monitor events. I will be one. We will contact your leaders in the mountains to help and then reassess the situation. That is, if we are still alive up there. The high priestess asked concernedly. Why, my lord? The guardian replied. The flooding will surely destroy our entire ground-based defensive machinery, command and control centers, data banks, library, and supply systems. Without them, we will be effectively helpless up there in orbit. So, this may also be my farewell visit. My beloved children and friends, as always, our fates are bound together. What will become of our children and their children without your guardianship? A weeping elderly woman asked. Things will get worse. Most of our work will be destroyed or buried. The times before the flood will become mythical. You will not be able to contact us. In time, people will question the very existence of a time when humans and guardians lived together as friends. Without our light, darkness will prevail. The language of light will be forgotten, along with the ability to understand the powers of radiant energy. Survivors will speak different languages that are limited in scope yet extremely complicated. People will grow ignorant of their neighbors and learn to fear another. People will live shorter, human society will be militaristic, materialistic, and discriminatory. Ruling warrior classes will govern a world of injustice, suffering, and neglect. Compassion, kindness, and consideration will be signs of weakness. Opportunists will suppress the true science of existence, alchemy, and replace it with ideologies to confuse the masses or condemn those who seek the highest truth. My Lord, what of all you have taught us? There must be a way to save it for future generations. You give me hope, the guardian said. I have and despise one unhappier lives assembled you here tonight to ask that those who survive must dedicate yourselves to a sacred cause. You must teach your children the arts of civilization and science. You must indoctrinate selected disciples in the spiritual arts and create depositories of such knowledge in highland sanctuaries and guard them. Preserve your knowledge by passing it to your disciples orally and write it down in stone, so that one or the other may survive. The followers of darkness will try to destroy it and persecute its guardians. Human souls will not evolve sufficiently to escape the gravity of the physical world. Instead of joining their stellar source, they will be trapped in the four-dimensional realm, a dysfunctional evolutionary pattern. The resulting stagnation will make people hopeless. Like a school of students who always fail, they must return to mortal life. The world's population will grow to unnatural, unsustainable levels. Salvation depends on you and your successors, the guardians of wisdom. Will we ever have your guardianship again? The priestess asked. Possibly, my child. The guardian closed his eyes as if traveling to another part of the universe. You call the galaxy we share with many different life forms the Milky Way. In about 12 and a half thousand years, space-time portals will reopen and let us bypass the long journey between us. Then we will return to Earth. We will meet again. Our destinies have always been intertwined, like two serpents coiled around a common axis, straining toward the heavenly source. The guardian paused to assure itself of everyone's attention. Our great stone pyramids of our ground base are practically indestructible. We will remove the harmonically resonant mineral matrices of those structures, the magic crystals or tablets of light as you call them. Their doors will be shut and sealed. They will fall silent and serve as emissaries from a lost mystery and more. The great pyramids are durable, their majesty is timeless. Inside and under them are chambers full of records, advanced knowledge and wisdom, all encoded in crystalline minerals, everything we have taught you and more. Someday people worthy of wisdom will discover them. And somewhere within the complex, the chamber of destiny reveals the universal sign, the sacred emblem of wisdom. It lets worthy initiates face the source of all creation. Only the enlightened are worthy of that privilege. My lord, have you beheld it? The guardian shone brightly and smiled. It is a glory to behold that cannot be. The guardian stopped, closed his bright blue eyes. It is the highest truth, the origin, destination, and destiny, everything about everything, and our nothingness in that everything. Do you understand? Our eager friends focused on every word. You are the guardians of the sacred message. Be careful to whom you offer your wisdom. Yours is a selective and secretive society. Your responsibility and destiny is humanity's survival. Salvation rests in your hands. Will you be ready and dedicated? The elders rose and bowed in unison. Such display of devotion was admirable from a group of humans who were about to face such catastrophe. The lake's calm waters reflected the sky's oncoming dawn hues of purple and orange, like a serpent shedding dark skin for lighter. I will go now. Be brave. Save and spread the message. The guardian moved toward its platform and stood on it. It gave its friends a haunting last look. Hydrogen pointed to a blue teardrop rolling down the guardian's face, just as the creature turned and pointed to the emblem on its chest. The source is destiny. I and the Father are one. The truth shall set you free. Jesus Christ. I am God. Sufi mystic Hallaj, 858 to 922 AD, executed by Muslim religious authorities for refusing to renounce that statement. God is an infinite sphere, whose center is everywhere, and whose circumference is nowhere. Hermes Trismegistus. Shortly after our friends reached their mountaintop cave, intense discussions resumed. Humans aspire for heaven. Helium commented. Wouldn't you want your soul to live among those great beings? Who knows? Maybe one day we can get this hole to send us there too. Given everything that has happened since that era, it's no wonder the world is full of troubled human souls, Sodium opined. Theirs is the sadness Buddha felt from the specks of light trapped in Earth's astral regions, reincarnating continuously, living miserably. Carbon-initiated, civilization re-emerged after the flood through the efforts of the Guardian's disciples. Those instructed by the ancient gods. The benevolent Azidahaka, Osiris, Virakaka, Quetzalcoatl, Vishnu, and countless other merely mythical dragon/serpent gods, wearing large elaborate crowns, and possessing magical powers. Calcium added, by Noah, Manu, and over 600 other global flood heroes, pagan gods, who later become tall, shining, blue-skinned, survivors that saved many crops and animal and plant species. Descending from the highlands, they settled and cultivated the nearby fertile river valleys in Egypt, Sumer, Elam, Chinese river deltas. Pay attention. Embedded in the Epic of Gilgamesh. A demigod, Gilgamesh civilizes Enkidu, a savage ape man, perhaps a reference to the primitive post-cataclysmic humanity. Together, they embark on a journey to find the source of immortality, a reference to hidden wisdom being protected by a serpent guardian. Throughout this epic, one is also introduced to the sacrificial heavenly bull, the multiple stages of danger and disillusionment confronting a seeker, as well as the flood hero. Silicone highlighted. Quite similar to many ancient spiritual myths that describe some ancient cataclysms, a tree of life or knowledge, Garden of Eden, the elixir of immortality, various godly guardians, evil breaking through the sky, a final day of renovation, and the returning God that will make humanity immortal. Phosphorus speculated. The fabled buried double pillars of sacred knowledge may have reincarnated as the twin obelisks, the twin pillars of Greek, Jewish, Templar, and Masonic temple entrances, or the twin minarets of Muslim mosques. The ancient Egyptians typically represented these sacred pillars with serpents coiling around them. The winged version of this later became the caduceus, the symbol of sacred sciences. Silver added. Ironically, the Canaanite reference for the sacred poles, Asheri, means sacred tree in Hebrew. Silicone prompted. Friends, Mercury interposed, the sun will come out soon. We must get ready the Indian subcontinent, and to the historic symbolism for another uncontrolled journey to yet another unknown era and destination. Uranium sighed. Hydrogen proposed. I've been wondering about that. After all, we've learned much about humanity, the world, the universe, and its source. Was it random? There must be a way to direct ourselves through the transportal. After a minute's silence, Helium turned to the meditating sodium and chlorine, and said, "Okay, you two, snap out of it. You're really beginning to resemble Buddha." Suddenly, sodium and chlorine jubilantly embraced. Of course. Sodium let out. How could we have missed it all this time? Yes, chlorine acknowledged. Teacher was showing us the way, but we hadn't understood. What are you two talking about? Everyone tuned into the unexpected exchange. Do you guys remember what Buddha said just before we parted? Sodium asked. Chlorine rushed a response. He said, never lose heart in your chosen path. Remember this carefully, once you have learned to focus your hearts to the wisdom of creation, then you shall find the way to your destination. What if the transportal responds to some hidden wisdom? If that's so, Buddha gave us the answer with that advice. We have never lost our desire to find the source, right? Maybe if we focus all of our senses, we can interact with the transportal, Sodium optimistically suggested. The first people I saw using the transportal seemed to know exactly what they were doing, Calcium confirmed. They knew all about their journey and their destination, but I don't have an idea how they got there. If, Silicone mused, Earth is an intelligent conscious God, it interacts with worthy Earthlings. Let's try to focus our consciousness, Mercury urged, and see if we can guide the transportal. It's certainly worth a try, Silicone concluded. The dawn began to light the mouth of the cave. Our friends wondered and hoped excitedly. Once again, they all embraced, and this time they focused on the time before the flood, more than 12,000 years earlier, and the Giza complex. After signaling their readiness, they joined the transportal. When the brilliant flash cleared, they found themselves gazing at three pristine pyramids covered in mirror-like polished white stone, reflecting the sun's light like glowing gems. They were flawless, breathtaking. Just then a small flying craft similar to the Guardian's Vimana flew swiftly by. We did it! We're here! They shouted and leaped for joy. These Calcium said. No humans could have done that, Titanium ventured. Aren't they aligned with the Earth's cardinal directions after the pole shift? Mercury asked. You're not wrong, Silicone corroborated. The margin of error in that alignment is 0.015%. And their sides are equal in length, 755 feet, with a margin of 0.1%, and they meet at an almost exact 90 degrees. With its 30-plus foot high capstone, the Great Pyramid rises 481 feet, and its apex projects precisely over the center of its base. Some of the inner stone blocks weigh more than 15 tons. Even in our era, few cranes can handle such weight. How could men have quarried and perfectly cut such giant blocks with bronze tools? How did they haul them hundreds of miles and raise them hundreds of feet with such accuracy? The pyramids are beyond imagination. Great Pyramid alone required over 2 million giant blocks. The polished white casing, vandalized to build Cairo, would have covered 22 acres. The joints between the layers are so tight you could barely insert a piece of paper into them. But wait, Silicon added, there's more. The Great Pyramid is a perfect scaled-down version of the Northern Hemisphere. Many other mathematical, geographical, and astronomical data are encoded within its properties. The thing is perfectly proportioned to the planet. We could discuss them for hours. Whatever they are for, they were built precisely in tune with the planet. How can people believe they're just tombs? Oxygen asked. The world's most elaborate stone coffins that never held corpses. Helium humored. I spot the Sphinx and a couple of other structures to the right, Nitrogen reported from aloft. The group followed Nitrogen's lead. They noticed that the landscape was no arid desert. It was a savanna of green grass, shrubs, wildflowers, and trees. Soon they stood before the Sphinx. My goodness, Copper marveled. Evidently, its point, Silicon said. And look. No veneer stones on the body. The Sphinx's appearance did not surprise them. It had the body of a lion and a head that resembled the guardian's, the same eyes and facial features, the same crown. The Sphinx sat in the middle of a pond where swans, geese, and other birds swam. Check out the other structures over there, Calcium said. Have you ever seen such perfection? Our friends turned to see two buildings. Oh, night looks so different now. Head was reshaped at some story structures with walls and roofs of large monolithic stone slabs perfectly cut and interlocked. They lacked windows, but each had two doors opposite the Sphinx. One also had an entrance that opened to the right of the Sphinx that opened onto a causeway that led to the Great Pyramid. Through the openings an intense light pulsed from inside the structures. Even from a distance, the friends felt its oscillatory energy on their tiny bodies. Given the circumstances, I suggest you all wait here while I try to get some answers. Silicon assumed the lead. I'll come along, Calcium offered. They embarked on a fact-finding foray. The rest stayed behind, silently admiring the majestic perfection about them. Some wondered what the planet would have been like had the flood not deprived it of the guardians. As Silicon and Calcium approached the structure at the end of the causeway, the pulsation affected everything around them. The structure vibrated silently, though not mechanically. Every part, every atom of the place, seemed to resonate in unison. As they got closer, the radiated energy became more evident. Was your old library like this? Calcium asked. No. This is altogether different. They went straight in and walked down a long corridor to a T-shaped hall supported by two rows of rectangular columns. A quick glance confirmed what they anticipated. The stone masonry was featureless, flawless, and immense, perfect monoliths weighing several tons. Around the perimeter, stone pilasters separated niches carved into the solid rock wall. In each was a smooth slab of clear crystal that dimmed and glowed with the same pulsating frequency. Well, Silicon said, we both see our own kind. Let's get busy. Calcium went for a stone masonry wall, and Silicon approached one of the pulsating crystals. After a while they returned to their friends, waiting anxiously near the causeway. So, where to? Helium asked. Every piece of stone in this area, Calcium said, was cut, shaped, transported, and lifted into place by harnessing the power of energy fields, either light or acoustic. Sophisticated mathematical knowledge, of unknown levels to Earthlings, was used in their design. They are tuned to the planet's harmonic heartbeat. Different types of crystals, silicone continued. As well as the whole complex perform specific tasks. What complex? Nitrogen called down. I see 3 pyramids, the Sphinx, and these 2 structures here. That's the complex. Just like the Guardian said, there is a big underground compound, Calcium said. Hydrogen turned to silicone. Can you find your old library from here? It's a few hundred kilometers north. Great. Helium hooted. Does that mean we need to hitch a Vimana? Well, not tonight, Silicone replied. I propose we spend our time exploring the place, Titanium said. Krypton agreed. If we can find a way inside the complex, maybe we'll find information for our next journey. But how do we find our way around the place? Phosphorus asked. The structure next to this one, Silicone said, houses a technical archive containing the blueprints of the entire complex. So the group trekked to the second complex in the dark, with only the crescent moon, the symbol of Thoth, illuminating their way. Once there and inside, Calcium and Silicone investigated and hurried back. In the back, Silicone hissed. They went down the central hall to the rear of the building where they found a long, narrow room, its walls covered from floor to ceiling with monolithic crystal panes. Silicone approached them, and one of the panes slowly emerged from its slot and lit up. Everyone drew near and saw an intricate diagram of lines, geometric shapes, and symbols. It's an overview of the whole complex, Mercury observed. That's what I asked for, Silicone said. Referencing the general plan, I can then ask for specific maps. It's the old way of doing things that I haven't forgotten. There are the pyramids and the other structures, Mercury said. Not much else above ground. But down here there's an extensive construction. Do you see? Yes, Silicone said, it's the underground complex. It's huge. Phosphorus interjected. Wait. Look. Over there to the west, near the Great Pyramid below that little hill. It's. Mercury spluttered, I can't believe it. You're right. I see it, Silicone said. It's the Guardian's insignia, dot. Is that why he pointed at it? Could it be? I know what you mean, Hydrogen said. It's certainly worth a try. Even if the Chamber of Destiny is there, Silicone cautioned, getting there won't be easy. But let's go. And so our friends rushed to view several different map panels, and studied the way to the subterranean location marked with the Guardian's insignia. On their way back to the central hall, Silicone and Mercury stopped at the hall's exact center, puzzled. Mercury pointed at a circular kryptonite plate embedded in the masonry floor tiles. It must be right here. What? The entrance to the underground passage. Krypton approached the plate and merged into it for a few seconds. Moments later the plate began to turn and slid beneath the stone floor tiles to reveal the entrance to a dark tunnel. Phosphorus was first in, whereupon he began to shine. Everyone followed before the metallic plate closed behind. Our friends entered the Giza underworld. Masonry blocks of exquisite workmanship lined the tunnel. They followed past large intersections where Mercury and Silicone conferred and selected the next route. Once in a while, they heard the sound of an underground stream. I feel like Gilgamesh, Silicone said. Why? When he and Enkiju went looking for the lost city of the gods, they searched for tunnels beneath the Mt. Mashu in some mythical desert. Does anyone in our time know about this underground labyrinth? Well, perhaps. Since the 1970s archaeologists have been using ground-penetrating radar here and lots of places. Underground networks have been detected. In the 1990s, they entered tunnels under the Sphinx, but the Egyptian government stopped the work. Rounding a bend, they reached a huge cavernous space where a large subterranean lake, fed by underground springs, filled water canals that disappeared from view in many directions. At several places, Sculptures of strange-looking symbols, figures, and landscapes adorned the cavern walls. Light-emitting crystals provided brilliant illumination. They figured they were about halfway to their destination. Sulfur asked Silicone what else he knew about the Giza complex. Much of it remains unexplored. One can still see a hole near the Sphinx tail where a ladder leads underground to a chamber underneath. Officially, it's sealed cavity that leads nowhere. The two structures next to the Sphinx are called as the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple. As I mentioned before, the most interesting stuff is scientific. In various places, the Great Pyramid encodes the Earth's mean surface temperature, the center of the world's land mass, the cardinal directions, the dimensions of the planet, the mean distance between Earth and the Sun, the seasonal equinoxes, and the number of days in a solar year. The Great Pyramid identifies universal mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. It also refers to the duration of Earth's precessionary cycle, 25,920 years. Both the King and Queen's chamber contain sloped shafts, a few inches wide, that run all the way up to, but not through the Great Pyramid's exterior surface. Also, the facing stone layer is missing, so the official theory that they are ventilation shafts is not very convincing. Building horizontal channels opening to the outside would have been easier and more useful. Inside the Queen's chamber, they were hidden behind several inches of stone. When 19th century English explorers found them, they could only insert an expandable rod into them. Not until 1993 did somebody design a machine to penetrate and explore them, but ran up against a limestone hatch with copper fittings. So much for the ventilation shaft theory. 10 years later, a high-tech robot drilled a 1-inch hole through the door and put a camera through. With the whole world watching, it met another stone blockage further up. Seems like the shafts were purposefully designed to be inaccessible to the technologically unworthy. Well, what are these shafts all about? Lead asked. Well, Silicone went on, suppose they were meant to channel, aim, and project an energy beam, some kind of signal or beacon. Beams powered by the Earth's energy fields, and focused and channeled by the Great Pyramid, would go right through a bunch of thin stone layers, probably meant to keep animals and debris out. What were they aimed at? One shaft in the King's chamber points to the stars of Orion's belt, and the other, at Thuban, the star that stood above the North Pole before the pole shift, the brightest star in the constellation Draco. The shafts in the Queen's chamber aim at Sirius and Ursa Minor, though the constellations have shifted a little over so many years. Silicone, Mercury, and Phosphorus stopped and scanned the surroundings. As I figure it, Mercury said, whatever the Guardian's insignia marked on the map must be right around here somewhere. There is nothing obvious here. But, having come all this way together, I'm certain we are not lost. I am sure of it, Mercury persisted. It must be here somewhere. Helium humored. Well, something as significant as the Chamber of Destiny would not have a flashing sign hanging above it. Meanwhile, Calcium edged up to the tunnel's wall and disappeared. While waiting for their friend, Krypton recalled Guardian's comments. The Guardian said that only the worthy could find this complex hidden in the mountains of stone. And that you need wisdom to reach them. Krypton had barely finished when Calcium re-emerged through a tiny opening between two blocks in the wall. This way. Hurry. I have arranged for a path to the Chamber of Destiny. Everyone sprinted to pass through the solid blocks of granite. They began to feel a mixture of eagerness, ecstasy, and tranquility. They were about to confront the universal sign. Would it be a sign of the source? Or perhaps a way to the source? If there was a way to learn about the source of all universal sign was the key. They emerged in the chamber. Phosphorus quickly illuminated the space, but they saw nothing. Constructed of masonry blocks, the room was empty, barely large enough to hold a few humans. Near the top of a wall, they spotted a tiny hole that pierced through to the rocky hillside in which the Chamber of Destiny was embedded. A narrow beam of moonlight peered dimly through the hole. And that was it. That opening faces east, Mercury said. Ventilation. Nitrogen suggested. Maybe for the rituals the Guardian spoke of. Silicone ventured. Look over here. Calcium pointed to a barely visible feature in the room, carvings on a section of the wall, a hieroglyphic text, unrecognizable except for Krypton. It's a really old writing system I can barely understand. It must be quite ancient, Krypton concluded. Can you make sense of it? Here is what I can make out. And Krypton read, Behold the mighty sign. Obey this to seek enlightenment. To seek eternal existence as a star. Creation, the of destiny. Withdraw the veil of darkness. Partake the high vibration. Bound are you in a plane. A vibratory trap of the heavenly bodies. The sign reveals the key to freedom, the highest truth. By the sun, see the sign. Embrace the light. For the light reveals the source. I knew we weren't lost, Lead crowed. The universal sign is here somewhere. Yes, but where? Is there anything else on this carving? No, Krypton said, nothing else. It is not readily visible. We have to look as the enlightened see. I believe there's another clue, Silicone said. By the sun, see the sign. Maybe it's visible only in sunlight or maybe when the sun comes up. But that's when we have to leave, Oxygen protested. The transportal has taken us to so much wisdom, and it got us here. Maybe, we'll get a glimpse of the universal sign just before it takes us back. Hopefully still in one enlightened peace. Helium smirked. We'll face our fate together. How much time do we have left? The sun will rise in a little over 33 minutes, Mercury answered precisely. Calcium returned from an investigative foray. I've been looking around to see if we're missing anything. This place is bare other than this carving. But there's a plain small blue crystal pane in the western wall. It is so perfect it seems otherworldly. Everyone here says the Guardians brought it and installed it when they built the chamber. Supposedly, it has a special purpose but nobody knows what, even though they've been here since the place was built. Remember, Oxygen said, the Guardian said the pyramid's secrets are not visible to the unworthy. The Guardians are more advanced in those special ways. They understand the harmony of the cosmos. That's why they glow and have psychokinetic powers. Some invisible energy interacts with matter, Lead said. That could explain the transportal's power. Divine fire, divine light, universal mind, cosmic soul, Hydrogen recited the past journey's encounters. What do you guess it all means? It must be what the soul is made of, Copper said. The soul of the universe? Gold asked. I remember the way the Guardian described the source, the highest truth, the origin, destination, and destiny, everything about everything, and our nothingness in that everything. But what about us? Are we worthy to have a ka or soul like humans? Can we perceive the source of all creation? The last lines tell us to comprehend the universal sign. For only then will the source of all become visible. We must embrace the light, for the light reveals the source. We have to follow those instructions exactly, Silicone said. Try to embrace whatever light we find. Understand the sign by remembering everything we've learned together. The true understanding of the universal sign and the mysterious light reveal the source. As always, Helium tried to help everyone relax. This blue tablet may just be our philosopher's stone. If we can comprehend the elixir of life or light or whatever it is, we may have our own alchemical awakening. Friends, Mercury warned, the time is near. Only a few minutes. Then there was silence. What did they feel? They felt so strongly. What? Respect, friendship, love, all of those, or perhaps a sense of boundless connection. They felt they were all part of the same body. Did they not all belong to Mother Earth? Did they not all come from the same source? They would have wept if they could. Did that mean they felt the love and compassion Sodium saw in the teardrop on Buddha's face? They realized they could not have come so far without each other, without their combined hydrogen, oxygen, silicon, calcium, carbon, gold, iron, copper, tin, silver, sulfur, potassium, lead, sodium, chlorine, mercury, phosphorus, titanium, uranium, krypton. How far would they have reached without each other? Not as far as they had, to be sure. They had shared the same destiny all along the source. The source is destiny. Perhaps that is the highest truth. Only if the complex humans could understand that all earthlings share the same source and destiny, then more earthlings would become worthy and take part in the next apocalypse, end days, or a transformation and renovation. Through the small east-facing opening of the perfect masonry wall, dawn's purplish-orange light beamed through to announce the sun's rising, the god of the solar system. That Messiah of Earth appeared to illuminate all earthlings and dispel the darkness. Had our friends become worthy? Would they see the universal sign? Could they understand its meaning and power? And if so, would they get a glimpse of the source before returning to their world? They felt neither fear nor anxiety, only intense anticipation. The dawn twilight grew stronger. They could see the chamber of destiny more clearly. No decor, no colorful designs, no egotistical declarations, no natural strengths. Nitrogen, helium, pretentious ornamentation. Just an unassuming humble room. In the brighter light, they studied the blue crystal in the western wall, a smooth crystalline plaque without symbol, engraving, or carving. Where was the universal sign? Then they remembered, through the sun, see the sign. Should they wait for the sun to guide them? They were only worried about the transportal's brilliant white light arriving too soon. Then all at once a narrow beam of light shone through the orifice in the wall and cast a small circle of light onto the northern wall. The circle was near the plain blue crystal and getting nearer. Some closed their eyes, maybe hoping to delay the transportal. But not hydrogen. Look. The narrow sunbeam lit the blue crystal, and the unassuming tablet began to radiate a brilliant blue light throughout the room. Look up. At last, the universal sign appeared, a blue holographic image hovering in mid-air at the center of the chamber of destiny. Our friends immediately recognized but no ordinary circle rounded the sacred symbol, plus, but rather a serpent swallowing its own tail rotated slowly around the plus dot around the rotating serpent were hieroglyphic symbols. Krypton read. The one is the all. Look at us. Someone shouted. They looked at each other. They were transformed. They were worthy after all. They were able to perceive their own true nature. They all looked the same. Indeed, they were the same. Throughout and deep inside their solid-seeming physical bodies, they saw only fields of rotating light, trapped, whirling, shining, astral fields of light. They no longer looked like simple earthlings, but like stars, constellations. That was what they were made of, not matter but energy fields, divine fire, divine light. They could now see beyond the material world's four-dimensional limitations. There is no such thing as matter if one is worthy to see a vision of true universal existence. Just before the transportal flashed, they looked at each other with newfound recognition. They had achieved illumination through an epic odyssey of enlightenment. They understood the meaning of the universal sign. They had finally understood that the source was within them, and they, within the source. Light arose in things not seen before. Buddha, if you look into even a grain of dust, you shall find a sun dwelling inside it. Unknown Sufi mystic, the truth is found in all things. Wherever I glance, I see it. Baba Tahir, 11th century Persian poet and mystic, all for one, and one for all. From the Three Musketeers, by the 19th century French Freemason, Alexandre Dumas.